Chapter 1132. Walking out of the study, several bodyguards outside came up to him. "Boss, we saw Feng Mingzhu just now. We've asked around and found out that old Masterly didn't pull any strings for her to come to China. She probably bribed the people around old Masterly to find out your whereabouts." Li Nanheng coldly curved his lips. "Tonight, all of you better be on guard. Don't let her approach Feng Ling." "What about Mrs. Mo? Arrange for Feng Ling and Jin Wan to a more secluded hall. Stay away from those messy young ladies. Based on Jin Wan and Feng Ling's personalities, they won't like to interact with those people. Tonight is Mr. Kai's housewarming party. Don't cause any unnecessary trouble." "All right, we understand. We'll definitely not allow Feng Ling and Feng Mingzhu to meet, lest Feng Ling quarrel with you again." The bodyguard smiled as he spoke. He signaled to the other brothers with his eyes and quickly slipped away before Boss Li's gaze could devour them. Li Nanheng's gaze shifted toward the window of the study. Even if Feng Ling and Feng Mingzhu met, based on Feng Ling's personality, since the misunderstanding had already been cleared up, she would not misunderstand anything just because of Feng Mingzhu's appearance. If there really was someone by the side asking about something, if Feng Ling had any doubts, she would definitely choose to ask him directly. She would not hold back her anger or allow the misunderstanding to spread. This was something he understood about her. Back then, if it wasn't because the Li elders had interfered and chased her out of the base, if it wasn't because she had left so pathetically, she wouldn't have been so cold-hearted to the point where she wouldn't even give him a chance to meet again. Although Feng Ling appeared to be somewhat muddle-headed when it came to relationships, there were actually many things that she had thought through thoroughly. She was pure by nature, but she was not stupid. After Feng Ling and Jin Wan entered the hall, they realized that Mr. Kai's new home was truly large. Several villas were situated within this 2,000 square meter area. The banquet hall was also divided into 4 halls: plum blossom, orchid, bamboo, and chrysanthemum. Several young men dressed as waiters approached to lead them to the orchid hall. They said that it was more secluded and suitable for Mrs. Mo to rest. Feng Ling thought these people found a secluded hall for them to rest because they knew Jin Wan was Mrs. Mo, so she didn't suspect anything and went over with Jin Wan. When they saw Jin Wan, they warmly greeted her and introduced themselves to each other. Feng Ling was about to stand guard outside the door when she was dragged in by Jin Wan. "Your injuries haven't healed yet. Why are you standing outside? Just sit here and eat. You don't have to show your face the entire time. You can leave after spending 2 hours here. You don't have to care about the others." Jin Wan nodded and said, "You're not fully recovered yet. Why are you standing outside? Just sit here and eat." "That may be the case, but there are many people here tonight. It's better for me to go out and take a look. Since you've asked us to rest in the orchid hall, then we should just stay here peacefully. The few ladies sitting here are all rich madams with whom we usually have no conflicts, and they don't seem to have any hidden agendas. With such a relaxing environment, you should just relax a little. You say that you're a bodyguard, but when have I ever seen you as one? Hurry up and sit down." Jin Wan's last few words were spoken in a commanding tone. Feng Ling could only sit down on the empty sofa beside her. When she sat down, she noticed Jin Wan glancing meaningfully at the scarf around her neck. Feng Ling quietly removed the scarf and placed it by the side. Initially, she didn't want to wear the scarf. However, Jin Wan said that she was wearing too little, and her coat was too thin. She didn't have anything to cover her neck and would definitely catch a cold. No matter what, she urged Feng Ling to buy a scarf to wear. Coincidentally, they passed by the hotel and Feng Ling stopped the car to retrieve the red scarf. She wore it here. During this period, Jin Wan even used the words "exceptionally beautiful" to describe Feng Ling, who was wearing the scarf. Even Feng Ling felt a little embarrassed. There were many people in the other 3 halls of the banquet hall. Due to Feng Mingzhu's unusual status in the Feng family, she was specially arranged to be in the main hall, the Plum Hall. Today, some people were wearing gowns, including Feng Mingzhu. Feng Mingzhu wore a long, form-fitting gown. Her long, curly hair rested on her shoulders, complementing the exquisite makeup on her face. She attracted many gazes, but she wasn't interested in those gazes. She only searched for Li Nanheng's figure in the crowd. Since she couldn't find anyone in the Plum Hall, she went to the other halls. Because she knew that there were very few people in the Orchid Hall and that most of them were women, and that it was located in the backyard of the most secluded villa district, Feng Mingzhu went to the Orchid Hall last. When she arrived at the entrance of the Orchid Hall, she abruptly saw Feng Ling sitting on the sofa by the side and chatting with Jin Wan with a faint smile. The moment she saw that Feng Ling was actually here, Feng Mingzhu's gaze instantly turned unfriendly. She scanned the area outside the door and took advantage of the fact that Feng Ling hadn't turned around to look outside. Seeing that Li Nanheng wasn't here, she directly turned around and left. As she walked, she clenched her fists tightly. She was really persistent. Did Li Nanheng know that she was here? Didn't they say that Feng Ling had no contact with Li Nanheng after she was chased out of the base? Furthermore, it was said that 11 Base had used some unknown method to summon Feng Ling back. However, Feng Ling bore a grudge against the base and refused to return. Furthermore, there didn't seem to be any close contact with Li Nanheng. It was said that when they met at certain events in Los Angeles, Feng Ling and Li Nanheng were like strangers. They didn't even look at each other. The two of them shouldn't have any contact, right? It was said that Feng Ling was currently Mrs. Mo's bodyguard. Thus, the long-haired beauty by her side should be the legendary Mrs. Mo. Because she wasn't sure what the relationship between Feng Ling and Li Nanheng was, it had been so long since the banquet started, but Feng Ling still hadn't gone to the front. It was likely that they hadn't met face to face and didn't know each other was here. Then it seemed like she should hurry up. Recently, when she was at the Li family, Grandfather Li had been dissatisfied with her because she had spread those things out. Recently, he hadn't helped her much. Even when she visited the Li family several times, Grandfather Li's attitude toward her was very cold. This time, she came to China to look for Li Nanheng. It wasn't Grandfather Li's help at all. Instead, she used all sorts of methods to tell the Li family's housekeeper about her feelings for Li Nanheng, crying and pitifully. Finally, the other party felt compassion for her and revealed a few things about Li Nanheng's schedule in T-City. Otherwise, she wouldn't even have the opportunity to appear at this banquet at the same time. 4M. Chapter 1133. The 3-year marriage between Li Nanheng and that cenotaph was going to end tomorrow. After this so-called 3-year marriage that would never be explained to the outside world, Li Nanheng's entire life would be reshuffled in 2 days. If she didn't hurry up and settle down now, it would be difficult for her to enter the Li family in the future. After all, Grandfather Li no longer planned on helping her. If she didn't harden her heart and do something, all these years of waiting and unwillingness would have been in vain. In the study on the 2nd floor, Li Nanheng played with his phone, his gaze deep. You really don't plan on going down? Qin Sighting's expression was interested. After all, this is Mr. Kai's family banquet. So many people know that the legendary heir of the Li family has appeared. If you don't show up, the old man won't be able to accept it. To be honest, Qin Sighting was quite looking forward to seeing Feng Mingzhu pester Li Nanheng. After being brothers for so many years, he had never seen Li Nanheng's companions bold enough to bump into an iceberg. This Miss Feng was truly stubborn. Li Nanheng suddenly smiled coldly. Why should I go down? Tonight's main character is Mr. Kai. I'm just a gimmick. There's no need to seek trouble. Feng Ling is in the Orchid Hall. You can avoid Feng Mingzhu's spies and go to the Orchid Hall to have tea with your little Feng Ling. Li Nanheng did not speak. His gaze looked out the window in the direction of the Orchid Hall. If Feng Mingzhu hadn't appeared tonight, he would have used this opportunity to drag Feng Ling out and dance with her. She had never experienced such a romantic occasion before, and it would bring out her adorable side. However, since Feng Mingzhu was here, and based on Feng Mingzhu's personality, he would definitely not show himself without a motive. Dragging Feng Ling out now would only create enemies for her and draw everyone's attention to her. On one hand, it would give her the status she deserved, but on the other hand, it would actually push her into a troublesome situation. It would be better to deal with these troubles before bringing her back to the hotel and coaxing her. It would be better than letting something unexpected happen here. Whether it was in 11 base or outside in the past few years, this little wife of his had always been at the front and worked hard to live well. Now, it was time for him to put her behind his back. Whatever cold wind and bitter rain, he would block it for her. Anything that shouldn't be splashed on her body, anything that shouldn't be dirted in her eyes, should never appear again, and should never come near her. In the latter half of the banquet, the people in the banquet hall all gathered in the courtyard of Mr. Kai's villa, dancing and chatting. It was a lively scene. Under Mr. Kai's urging, Li Nanheng finally showed himself. America's Li Corporation was very low profile in the business world, but who didn't know that the Li Corporation had always played the stable card of seeking victory? Their family's business legend had already shocked the American Chinese community several decades ago. Right now, it was just that the elders were getting on in years, and because Li Nanheng had not taken over the family business, they had become much more low profile. But even so, everyone was aware of the Li family status and the mysterious United Nations-related military base behind the Li family. This was also a rare occasion for Li Nanheng to appear in public. Many successful people whom he was familiar with and whom he had never interacted with before approached to chat. Li Nanheng's expression was calm and he appeared to be smiling. However, those who approached could sense that this Mr. Li was giving off an unapproachable aura. It was clear that he was not easy to approach, and the Li family was not a family that one could easily climb up to. Arriving at Mr. Kai's side, the old man hurriedly turned back to speak with Li Nanheng politely. At this moment, a waiter came over to serve wine. Li Nanheng casually picked up the glass of red wine closest to him and clinked it with Mr. Kai's. After taking a sip, his movements paused. Without batting an eyelid, he smiled at Mr. Kai before turning back to look at Qin Siding, who was standing nearby, chatting happily with others. Sensing Li Nanheng's cold gaze, Qin Siding smiled and said a few words to the people in front of him. He then patted Mr. Kai's shoulder and turned to walk over. "What's wrong?" "There's something wrong with the wine." While the others were blocking Mr. Kai's way, Li Nanheng took the opportunity to turn around and pass the wine glass to him. Qin Siding received it and brought it to his nose to take a whiff. Then, he raised his brows and looked at the surrounding crowd and the waiters who had long disappeared. He chuckled lightly. "She's too impatient. She clearly knows that you're about to regain your single status in name, so she wants to hurry up and cook the rice." Li Nanheng coldly glanced at him. "What's in the wine?" "This should be a very perverted and highly effective aphrodisiac from India. It's hard to detect when the scent is mixed in the red wine. However, you've trained in 11 base all year round, so your alertness isn't something an ordinary person can achieve. It's rare for you to be able to detect such a colorless and odorless substance in a second." As Qin Siding spoke, he casually poured the wine onto the grass by the side. Then, he brought the empty glass to his face and sniffed it carefully. At the same time, he asked, "Did you drink it earlier?" "I did." Li Nanheng's expression was somewhat heavy. Qin Siding instantly sneered. "How much did you drink?" "A mouthful." "It's all right." Although the effects of the drug are rather fast and the effects are somewhat perverted, thankfully, you didn't drink much. If it's just a mouthful, at most, you won't be able to sleep well for the entire night. It's not a big deal. As Enchanting spoke, he picked up another red wine glass by the side and handed it to him. Come, drink some wine to calm yourself. Nowadays, men should indeed protect themselves well when they go out. Otherwise, who knows when a woman will suddenly appear and force you to sleep with her. When Li Nanheng heard the words, at most, you won't be able to sleep well for the entire night, his expression darkened. He took the wine glass but did not drink it. He only glanced at him coldly. Indeed, Dr. Qin, not only were you forced to sleep with someone back then, but you were also kicked after you slept with someone. In this world, it's not only women who are not safe, but men are also not very safe when they go out. Enchanting, Li Nanheng called the bodyguards over and said coldly, check the surveillance footage tonight. Find out who Feng Mingzhu was in direct contact with tonight. Find out which waiter received a bribe from her to help her put something in her wine. After finding out who it was, drag that person out and cripple him. The bodyguard was startled. They had been guarding by the side the whole time and really didn't pay much attention to the wine that Boss Li was willing to drink. After hearing this, he couldn't help asking curiously, Boss, are you drugged? Li Nanheng's face darkened. Cut the crap. Go quickly. Oh, okay. 4M. Chapter 1134. 10 minutes later. Boss, I found it. The bodyguard walked through the crowd and approached Li Nanheng to whisper, Miss Feng spent a large sum of money to bribe a waiter working here. Miss Feng also claimed that she was not feeling well and went to the lounge that Mr. Kai had specially arranged for these guests. She found a room to rest and reportedly hasn't come out for more than 10 minutes. That waiter was blocked by the surveillance camera. Afraid that we would report him, he confessed everything. Miss Feng is waiting inside. After you drink, he will help you in. As they spoke, the two bodyguards occasionally raised their heads to glance at Li Nanheng's face. They could not see anything unusual on Boss Li's face, nor could they tell that Boss seemed to have been drugged. Enchanting turned to look at Li Nanheng. Li Nanheng calmly lit a cigarette and put it in his mouth. Then he narrowed his cold, black eyes and turned to look in the direction of the Plum Blossom Hall at a few business rivals who were competing with the Li Corporation. He then saw a few old presidents who were drunk among those people. I think you might as well sacrifice yourself. Soon, everything in the Feng family will belong to you. Enchanting saw that Li Nanheng's patience was not bad. He tried his best to suppress his laughter. What are you hesitating for? Go up. Li Nanheng glanced at him indifferently. You want to go? Enchanting chuckled. I've been a doctor for a long time. I have a strong sense of rejection toward any bacteria. I definitely won't be able to go up. You also know that it's a bacteria colony. It's not anything good. How much do you think this old man's desire is? Can a woman go up? Li Nanheng held the cigarette in his mouth indifferently. At the same time, he glanced at the building where the bodyguard was pointing at. He held the cigarette in his mouth and narrowed his eyes coldly. No wonder she doesn't want to return to the Feng family. There's no harm in staying far away from this swamp. Who? Enchanting watched him. Enchanting looked elegant, gentle, and as clear as water, but in fact, he was not ordinary smart. He did not need Li Nanheng to say a word to be able to analyze a lot of truth from his words. He looked at Li Nanheng for less than 3 seconds, and his elegant and deep brows moved. Without waiting for Enchanting to speak, Li Nanheng smiled coldly. Without explaining, he threw the cigarette butt into the ashtray on the tray in the waiter's hand and walked toward the Plum Hall. In Mr. Kai Da's villa, the VIP lounge was located on the 3rd floor of the villa. Walking up the spiral staircase from the chrysanthemum hall, a bald man in his 40s with a beer belly was helped up by a waiter. This waiter was the one who had been bribed by Feng Mingzhu. At this moment, he was trembling in fear as he supported the drunk boss next to him. From time to time, he glanced back, but when he saw the two fierce-looking bodyguards, he was so frightened that he didn't dare to make a sound and continued to support the boss up. When they reached the third floor above the chrysanthemum hall, the waiter whispered as he walked, "It's on this floor. Miss Feng is resting in the room in front." Li Nanheng then walked up, expressionlessly watching the direction they were heading in. When he saw that the Guixia Corporation CEO Liu was supported to the door of the room, he coldly shifted his gaze toward the window at the end of the corridor. He could see the main entrance of the orchid hall. Feng Ling and Jin Wan were both holding on to their phones. Jin Wan seemed to have come up with some small game and dragged Feng Ling along to play with her. Feng Ling played with her seriously while occasionally furrowing her brows. It was clear that she did not understand the game and lost. After a few more minutes, Feng Ling gradually learned how to play. Her brows gradually relaxed, and a smile appeared in her eyes. From time to time, she would chat and laugh with Jin Wan while tapping on her phone with her finger. He then glanced at the red scarf that she had carefully placed on the sofa. A faint smile flashed across Li Nanheng's eyes. At the same time, at the end of the corridor, there was a light knock on the door. Under the cold stare of the two bodyguards, the waiter stood in front of the door and said, "Miss Feng, I've brought him here. Is it convenient for you to open the door now?" After a short while, Feng Mingzhu's voice sounded slightly muffled. "I'm showering. Help him up first." "All right." The waiter tried to push the door and found that it was not locked. He could only bite the bullet and help the drunken CEO Liu in. He did not dare to stay any longer. Inside was Miss Feng, who had just thrown him 100,000 yuan bank card, and outside were the bodyguards waiting to take his life. He hurriedly helped CEO Liu to the bed, looked back at the bathroom door, and ran out as though there was oil on the soles of his feet. As soon as he ran out, he suddenly bumped into the two bodyguards who had yet to leave. The moment the waiter met their fierce gazes, he was so frightened that his legs turned to jelly and he almost knelt on the ground. With a pleading expression, he said, "Please, let me go, please. I've already done as you said. I have to take care of my parents and children, life isn't easy, so I was careless and was blinded by lard. I was greedy for money. Please let me go." One of the bodyguards glanced at him coldly. "Brat, you look like you're only in your early 20s. I can believe that you have parents, but you have children. You." The waiter's expression stiffened and he hurriedly explained, I get married early. I do have children at home, don't explain to us. There will be a place for you to explain later." The bodyguard was too lazy to listen to his nonsense. He directly pushed the waiter's head to the other bodyguard. The two of them held the waiter down and warned him to shut up from now on, lest he disturb the people inside. The waiter trembled in fear and did not dare to speak. He looked at them pleadingly with his eyes, but they ignored him. He turned to look at the man standing silently in front of the window at the top of the stairs. Even though it was only his back view, he felt his legs go even weaker. In the room, CEO Liu was drunk and drowsily snoring on the bed for a long time. Feng Mingzhu heard the snoring outside while taking a shower in the bathroom. She had never heard how Li Nanheng slept, so she thought the rough snoring came from him. As she took a shower in the bathroom, she felt her face burning with excitement and shyness. She sped up the shower, wanting to get out as soon as possible. After all, Li Nanheng was too vigilant. She didn't know how effective this powerful drug was on him, but at least it should be effective in the first half of the night, so she had to hurry up. At this time, CEO Liu suddenly choked on his own snoring. He suddenly coughed and half woke up. In a daze, he felt the obvious need to pee. Hearing the sound of water coming from the bathroom, he got up from the bed and staggered toward the bathroom. 4M. Chapter 1135. Just as Feng Mingzhu was about to pick up the towel, she suddenly heard the bathroom door being pulled open. Her heart thumped wildly and she turned around, only to see a middle-aged man with a big belly and an oily face walking in while unbuckling his belt. "Ah!" Feng Mingzhu instinctively screamed. Before the other party could react, she subconsciously turned around and was stunned to see a naked beauty. She was so frightened that she hurriedly grabbed a towel and wrapped it around her body. "Which brat sent me this beauty this time? She's pretty good." CEO Liu had long forgotten where he was. It wasn't like he had never made a deal before. The moment he saw this beauty with fair skin and an excellent figure, his need to pee instantly turned into a desire for sex. He directly pounced on her. "Come, baby, I'm in a good mood today. Scram. Scram." Feng Mingzhu glared at him fiercely. She grabbed the shampoo and shower gel by her hand and threw them at him. But because she was in too much of a hurry and was frightened, when she tried to run out of the narrow bathroom, her feet suddenly slipped on the wet floor and she fell hard on the ground. She was in so much pain that she was half lying on the ground, trembling all over. CEO Liu lowered his head and saw that the towel she had wrapped around her body had come undone again, revealing half of her snow-white back. From the side, he could still see that seductive bundle of white. His eyes immediately lit up as he bent down to touch her back. "Ah! Don't touch me." Feng Mingzhu only felt disgusted and screamed again. She wanted to push him away, but the fall earlier was too painful. It felt as though all the bones in her body had been broken. She struggled on the ground and tried to push him away. However, she was still pulled up by the old man behind her. He held her tightly in his arms and lowered his head to smell her chest harshly. "Scram! Don't touch me, scram!" Feng Mingzhu was flustered. She forcefully scratched this disgusting man's head and face. The other party suddenly grabbed her hair unhappily and ordered her to be more obedient. At the same time, he pressed her against the bathroom door and reached his hand down her body. She raised her leg to kick him, but it didn't budge. She suddenly turned to look at an aromatherapy bottle on the sink. The body of the bottle was made of very thick and strong brown glass. When she felt this disgusting old man's hands groping her body more and more arrogantly, Feng Mingzhu completely lost her rationality. She abruptly grabbed the tea-colored glass aromatherapy bottle and ruthlessly smashed it against the back of his head. The old man, who was doing whatever he wanted to her, instantly leaned against her and stopped moving. There was a faint smell of blood in the air. Feng Mingzhu stood stiffly in front of the door until she felt the old man slide down her body bit by bit. Finally, he lost his support and fell heavily to the ground. Feng Mingzhu stared blankly at the old man on the ground. When she saw that the blood flowing out from the back of his head had instantly dyed the ground around him red, she was so frightened that she hurriedly threw away the heavy glass bottle in her hand. She then grabbed the half-wet towel on the ground and wrapped it around her body. She turned around and hurriedly ran out. Why did Li Nanheng, who should have been sent in, become such a disgusting old man? Did that waiter betray her? What was going on? Did she kill someone just now? Feeling flustered, Feng Mingzhu wrapped herself in a towel and rushed out without even thinking of putting on her coat. Someone come, quickly, someone come. Feng Mingzhu had just rushed out of the door and was about to run toward the stairs, but her footsteps suddenly froze. She wanted to call for help, but her voice was also choked in her throat. She stared in disbelief at the man who was standing outside her door and casually leaning against the wall. He held a half-smoked cigarette in one hand and put the other in his trouser pocket. He just stood there coldly. Li Nanheng looked at her indifferently. At the moment when all the calmness in Feng Mingzhu's eyes was about to shatter, even though he was 3 or 4 meters away, he still spat out white smoke in her direction. In the midst of the smoke, the man's eyes were filled with coldness and mockery. You! Feng Mingzhu looked at him and took a step back in fright. It seemed that she finally understood what was going on. When did Miss Feng come to T-City? Why didn't you inform me in advance? There was not the slightest hint of a smile in Li Nanheng's eyes. He looked at her coldly. This Li could have arranged for someone to entertain you in advance. There was no need for Miss Feng to use a glass of wine to remind this Li of his negligence. It sounded like he was just being polite, but from the man's thin lips that were covered in smoke, there seemed to be some kind of cold murderous intent in his words. He would not kill her. Even though many people had died in his hands, no matter what, she was still the daughter of the Feng family. The Feng and Li families were close, and her sister's cenotaph was his wife in name. It was impossible for him to take her life. Feng Mingzhu gradually recovered from her shock. She was about to speak when she suddenly heard a few panicked voices coming from the stairs. Where is our old Lu? He drank too much earlier. Did he come up here? Hearing the woman's voice, Feng Mingzhu didn't react until she saw a well-maintained middle-aged woman in a gown hurriedly walking over. As she walked, she looked inside. When she saw Feng Mingzhu standing there with only a bath towel wrapped around her, her gaze immediately paused. With a woman's intuition, she seemed to have a bad premonition and directly glared at Feng Mingzhu. Where is old Lu? At this moment, the middle-aged woman suddenly shouted harshly. Feng Mingzhu's shoulders instinctively trembled. The bodyguard following behind the middle-aged woman respectfully lowered his head to say, Mrs. Lu, I'm really sorry. We didn't know that you also came to attend the banquet today. CEO Lu drank too much earlier and came up to rest with this Miss Feng. Hearing this, Mrs. Lu glanced at the towel wrapped around Feng Mingzhu's body. At the same time, she saw the scratches and kisses on Feng Mingzhu's shoulders and neck when CEO Lu almost violated her. She was instantly enraged. She fiercely smashed the bag in her hand toward Feng Mingzhu's face. You smelly B*TCH, you dare to seduce my husband. Feng Mingzhu was originally a vigilant person, but she was still confused by the wave after wave of situations in front of her. When she was hit by the bag, her face paled. She wanted to explain, but in an instant, Mrs. Lu suddenly rushed up and pushed her to the ground. Mrs. Lu sat on top of her and fiercely clawed at her face with her nails. Chapter 1136. Ah! I didn't, get lost. Feng Mingzhu, who was repeatedly scratched on her face, was about to collapse, but because she was afraid that the towel on her body would fall apart, she could only use one hand to cover it. However, in this situation, she was completely helpless in front of this crazy, angry woman. Seeing that she kept protecting the towel on her body, Mrs. Lu's eyes reddened with anger and reached out to grab her towel again. Smelly whore, you're shameless, this old lady will make you completely lose your face. I didn't seduce your husband, you misunderstood, this is a misunderstanding, someone framed me. However, no matter how Feng Mingzhu shouted, Mrs. Lu still tore off the towel on her body. In an instant, Feng Mingzhu curled up naked on the ground in the corridor, exposed to everyone. Li Nanheng expressionlessly turned and walked away, too lazy to look at her. When Mrs. Lu saw the scratches on Feng Mingzhu's chest and body, she raised her hand and slapped her face. Damn, you shameless vixen. Feng Mingzhu fell to the ground, her wet hair disheveled. She was on the verge of a breakdown, but she still used her hands to cover her body. She struggled to raise one hand and clawed at the air, trying to pull the towel back. At this moment, one of the two bodyguards from earlier quickly walked into the room. In less than 5 seconds, he rushed out and shouted at Mrs. Liu, who was still pressing Feng Mingzhu to the ground and slapping her face. "Oh no, someone is going to die." When Mrs. Liu heard that someone was going to die, she suddenly raised her head. When she saw the bodyguard's gaze, she seemed to understand something. She quickly got up and ran into the room. At the same time, she raised her high-heeled foot and kicked Feng Mingzhu's stomach hard. Then, ignoring Feng Mingzhu's cries of pain on the ground, she directly rushed into the room. Then Mrs. Liu's screams came from the room. "What's going on? Why did that little bitch injure my husband? So much blood. Quick, call the police, call the ambulance, quick. Old Liu, wake up. You can't have anything happen to you. If something happens to you, how can my child and I live? You damn ghost, you fool around outside every day. In the end, you still fell into a woman's trap. Did that vixen ask you for money and you refused, so she hurt you with hatred? Old Liu, wake up. What are you waiting for? Call the police." "I've already called the police." The bodyguard looked on coldly from behind and said, "There's a police station nearby. The police will be here soon." "Has the ambulance been called?" "Nothing can happen to our old Liu." "Yes, I have. Please rest assured, Mrs. Liu." "Oh, Lao Liu." Mrs. Liu continued to cry on Mr. Liu, who was lying on the ground motionlessly. In just a few minutes, everything seemed to have been reversed. Feng Mingzhu fell to the ground. When the bodyguard walked back and forth, he felt that she was an eyesore. When he came out of the room, he took out her coat and threw it on her. Feng Mingzhu hurriedly grabbed the coat and wrapped it around her body. She raised her head to look at the crowd that had gathered in the corridor after hearing the news. She could not see Li Nanheng, who was blocked by the crowd. When she saw someone take a picture of her with a cell phone, she was so frightened that she hurriedly raised one hand to cover her bruised and red face. Her other hand gripped the corner of the coat tightly. When the nearest police station heard that something had happened to Mr. Kai's family, they immediately mobilized all the police force to rush over. They rushed upstairs and brought the unconscious Mr. Liu and Mrs. Liu away. After listening to the bodyguard's description of the scene, they coldly dragged Feng Mingzhu, who was unable to get up from the ground for a long time, and brought her away as well. Feng Mingzhu knew that she had offended Li Nanheng because of Feng Ling, and because of the glass of wine today, she had crossed his bottom line. When she was forcefully dragged away by the police, she looked at him with reddened eyes. She staggered as she gritted her teeth and said, "Li Nanheng, you can't do this to me." Li Nanheng glanced at her indifferently but did not reply to her. He watched expressionlessly as the police took her away. Because of the relationship between the Feng family and the Li family, he couldn't punish Feng Mingzhu personally for the time being, but she had hurt someone by herself. If she was unlucky, she might have to bear the consequences. That CEO Liu was also a well-known figure in the business circle of T-City. Although he was a bit despicable, he still couldn't be ignored. He just used someone else's hands to give her the punishment and warning she deserved. With the Feng family around, coupled with the fact that she was an American citizen, nothing would happen to her in the country. However, she would still be publicly sent back to America by the police. If her reputation were to spread, it would be a fatal blow to both her and the Feng family. It would be 100 times more painful than personally torturing her. Wonderful. Qin Siding stood by the staircase and watched the entire scene. He gave a perfunctory compliment and glanced at Li Nanheng. "You've been drinking for a while. Can you still hold on?" Li Nanheng coldly glanced at him. He saw that Li Nanheng did not appear to have any problems or changes. However, his gaze was dark and cold. It was clear that he was unable to control his irritation and coldness. Enchanting chuckled. If you really can't take it, I'll send you to the hospital for a tranquilizer. You'll be fine after a short sleep. There's no need. Li Nanheng's expression was cold. This is just a small problem. This old man can handle it myself. Enchanting smiled mockingly. That medicine isn't simple. I'm afraid I'll have to trouble your hands. Tonight's event was just a banquet to join in the fun. There was no need for too much social interaction or excessive small talk. As long as they gave Mr. Kai some face and personally attended, it would be enough. They were afraid that Jin Wan, who usually did not like attending business banquets, would come. Throughout the entire event, the two of them ate, drank, and played with their phones in the orchid hall. When the banquet ended, they directly informed Mr. Kai and left. On the way back, Jin Wan had almost fallen asleep. Feng Ling drove her back to the condo. She did not know if Mr. Mo was in T-City today, but seeing that Jin Wan seemed to be in a good mood, she guessed that Mr. Mo should be waiting for her in the condo. Feng Ling did not think too much about it. When they arrived, she woke Jin Wan up and watched her return to the condo. After confirming that Jin Wan had safely entered, she drove off in the direction of the hotel. She had been out the entire night. There were still some serious wounds on her body. Although they no longer hurt, she still needed to apply some medicine. She had to return early to apply the medicine to prevent the wounds from getting infected. Chapter 1137. Feng Ling had just parked the car in the parking lot downstairs of the hotel when she suddenly heard the sound of a car whistling past. She got out of the car and looked over, only to see that Li Nanheng's car had just entered the parking lot and was parked diagonally across from her. Did he just come back? You're also so late today. Feng Ling walked over and asked. Li Nanheng had seen her car when she drove in. He wanted to sit in the car for a while, but when he heard her voice, he knew that he couldn't hide it anymore, so he rolled down the window and looked at the little woman wearing a red scarf standing outside the car with his dark eyes. He suddenly smiled. This scarf is not bad. Is it warm? Feng Ling gently responded. In fact, she was a little embarrassed, but she had to admit that it was really warm. And today, Jin Wan had been praising her for wearing a red scarf. The black and red color combination was also very beautiful. She didn't notice the extra hoarseness in the man's voice when he spoke. Usually, when Li Nanheng was in front of her, he always wanted to kiss her, and often when he held her, his voice would be a little hoarse. As sensitive as she was, she didn't notice his strangeness for a moment. Aren't you going to get out of the car? Seeing him sitting in the car, Feng Ling asked. Go up and rest first. I'll go up after I make a call, Li Nanheng said and smiled at her. Feng Ling saw that his movement seemed to be a little slow when he was about to take out his cell phone from his pocket. Although she didn't see anything wrong with him, she instinctively asked, Are you not feeling well? Li Nanheng paused and turned to look at her through the open car window. No. The underground parking lot is very cold. If you have any calls, go back to the room. If it's not convenient for me to listen, I'll go back to the bedroom to wash up. Since we've already met here, is it necessary to go back separately? Feng Ling said as she stood outside the car door waiting for him to get out. Usually, she avoided him. Even after they reconciled, he was often the one who took the initiative. It was rare for her to insist on something. Now she insisted on going up with him. If it were any other time, Li Nanheng would indeed be in a good mood because she was changing bit by bit and becoming more open and happy. But now, facing this little woman wearing a red scarf, which made her small face look even whiter and more attractive, Li Nanheng only felt that it was a kind of torture. After about half a minute, Li Nanheng got out of the car. When he got out of the car, the cold air outside made him feel refreshed. However, he still stood by Feng Ling's side after closing the car door. He didn't rush forward and domineeringly hold her in his arms like he usually did. He maintained a distance of about half a meter from her and said, "Let's go." Feng Ling glanced at him and turned to walk to the elevator in the underground parking lot. After entering the elevator, Feng Ling took out the room card from her bag and asked, "Are you sure you're not sick?" "The man responded faintly. In the narrow elevator space, the mirror of the elevator door reflected Feng Ling's movements as she lowered her head to flip through the bag. Looking at the little woman's soft hair and rare expression that was not so cold and even slightly gentle, Li Nanheng felt that the effect of the wine he had drunk might not be too strong earlier, but now it seemed to be getting more and more serious. At this moment, Feng Ling finally realized that something seemed to be wrong with him. If it was any other time, he would have stuck close to her and couldn't wait to kiss and hug her in the elevator. Even if he didn't kiss or hug her, he definitely wouldn't keep such a distance from her. The space in this elevator was not big. She stood near the door, but he stood behind and had no intention of approaching at all. When the elevator opened with a ding sound, Feng Ling walked out. When she opened the door, she turned back to look at him, but the man still stood behind without speaking. She walked in, changed her shoes, and glanced at him. Li Nanheng. The man entered the door, took off his coat, and casually threw it aside. He turned back because she called him. Seeing that his expression and state did not seem strange, she said, "Didn't you say you wanted to make a call? I'll go back to the bedroom to wash up and change my dressing. You can do whatever you need to do." "All right. Be careful not to touch the wound," the man instructed. Indeed, there was nothing strange. Was it because she wore a red scarf today that her mood also turned red? Was it because she had become like other women who would speculate too much about a man's psychological plot because of a slight change in his mood? It shouldn't be. There was nothing different, but she felt that something was indescribably wrong. Seeing that the man went to the study with his phone, Feng Ling turned and went back to the bedroom. After taking a shower and changing her dressing, about 40 minutes passed. During this time, she did not hear any movements outside. Feng Ling sat quietly in the room for a while, glanced at the text message that Jean Wan had sent her after returning home, and replied. After informing each other that they were safe, she put the phone aside. After sitting for a while, Feng Ling got up and walked out of the bedroom. She saw that the door to the study was closed, and the door to the bedroom was still ajar, which meant that he had not come out since entering the study. It was likely that he was not feeling well, or that he had met someone outside today that made him unhappy and was in a bad mood or something. In any case, she was his girlfriend. It didn't seem like that was the case for her to ignore him. Feng Ling thought for a moment and went into the kitchen. She opened the refrigerator and rummaged through it for a long time. She remembered that there was a faint smell of alcohol on Li Nanheng's body. She didn't know if he had a drinking party tonight or if he only drank and didn't eat anything. She didn't know how to cook, but she still knew some simple things. So she went to make a very simple bowl of onion and egg soup. This kind of food was not greasy and warmed the stomach. It was suitable to eat at this time of night. After making it, Feng Ling walked to the door of the study with the soup in her hand, raised a hand, and gently knocked on the door. There was no response from the person at the door. She calculated the time. Li Nanheng had been in for so long. He should have finished making the phone call. There was no sound now. Was he asleep? Feng Ling tried to turn the doorknob, and the door of the study opened in an instant. She entered the door with the soup in her hand, but the moment she entered the door, she saw that the man was in the study. The scene in front of her shocked Feng Ling, and the soup in her hand fell to the ground. The hot soup splashed all over the ground. Her eyes were flustered, and she did not dare to meet the man's dark and dangerous eyes. She hurriedly stepped back, saying as she backed out of the door, "I didn't see anything." "You can continue, Happy New Year." The 80,000 words that the babies had written in the past 2 days were not very satisfying. Cough, cough. Bosley had to deal with it himself because the drug was too strong. Ha ha ha. In the end, Fong Ling bumped into him. He had considered that she had not recovered from her injury, so he did not touch her. But now that he had bumped into her, the question was, should he continue to let her go? Chapter 1138. The soup stains on the ground were too hot, and when they landed on the ground, there was still a faint wave of hot air. Fong Ling retreated in panic. It was rare for her to be seen panicking in so many years. She didn't know where to look and turned to run out. "Wait." The man's voice was low, hoarse, and heavy, with a hint of determination that she couldn't understand. When Fong Ling's footsteps froze in front of the study door, the man stood up and walked toward her. Fong Ling didn't expect to see such a shocking scene. She had only cooked a bowl of chicken soup for him because she was afraid that he was feeling unwell or in a bad mood. She had heard from Xiao Ba and Xia Tian that many young girls would often secretly watch all kinds of movies that men liked to watch in their dormitories, so she actually knew everything. But Fong Ling had never watched them. She hadn't even read a pornographic novel, aside from the time when she was pressed on the bed by this man who was so sick that he was muddle-headed. She had only heard about this kind of man's physical needs from the brothers in the base when they joked with each other, but she had never really seen it. Just now, she finally saw it, feeling the man approaching from behind, and his breath almost instantly surrounded her. Fong Ling's hand gripped the door frame tightly and tried to make her voice sound as calm as possible. "I didn't see anything clearly, you. She couldn't continue and was about to leave. However, at this moment, the man's arm abruptly pulled her back. Fong Ling almost cried out softly. Her body fell heavily into his arms, and when she could feel the heat of his body through his clothes, she was even more shocked and rushed to struggle. "I didn't mean to see it just now. Let go of me. I'm going back to the bedroom to rest. It's getting late. I'm going to sleep now." However, at this moment, the man directly pressed her against the door. Furthermore, she was facing the door, her forehead pressed against the slightly cold door. Behind her was the man's unusually hot body, firmly pressing her here. Li Nanheng hugged her. Rather than saying that he was hugging her, it would be more accurate to say that he pressed half of his body weight on her back in a barbaric and domineering manner. He bent down by her ear, and his hot breath brushed against her ear. "Originally, I didn't plan to do anything to you because you haven't recovered from your injury. I forced myself to let you go. I closed the door of the study and tried my best not to think about you, but you came in yourself. Do you know what this means?" Although Fong Ling was a little flustered by his strange behavior, she still noticed something. Usually, even when he bullied her and deliberately took advantage of her, his body would not be so hot. "Bosley, did you eat something unclean?" she guessed and asked directly at the same time. At this moment, the man laughed hoarsely by her ear, and his hoarse voice made her heart tremble. "Yes." Fong Ling instantly trembled between his arms and the door. This tremble was not because of the cold, but because of the man's extremely hoarse voice, which made her whole body feel weak. She pressed her face against the door and said calmly, "Then bear with it. I'll call a doctor for you, or you can control yourself first. I'll think of a way for you." Before she could finish speaking, the man behind her directly kissed her ear. She suddenly trembled all over and almost couldn't finish the second half of the sentence. She didn't dare to push him away, nor did she know where to put her hands. She could only put her hands on the cold door. Boss, wake up. I can't wake up anymore." Li Nanheng's voice almost poured into her ears. He hugged her abdomen again, and at the same time, he heavily pulled her back from the door. As though announcing something, he said hoarsely, "I can't control myself anymore." Feng Ling was about to speak, but suddenly the world in front of her suddenly spun. Li Nanheng abruptly carried her on his shoulder, and she hung upside down on his shoulder. Her abdomen and stomach were squeezed, and she immediately groaned. She rushed to break free from his shoulder, but the man did not give her any face and patted her butt hard. "Don't move. Feng Ling." This bastard, was he going to take advantage of her while she was unconscious again? "Li Nanheng, put me down." Feng Ling struggled for a while, but because of the serious injury on her arm, she did not dare to hit him hard. However, when the man carried her out of the study and passed by the living room, he could no longer sober up to take a detour. Passing by the coffee table in the middle, he felt that the coffee table was a hindrance and directly kicked it over. Feng Ling stared in shock at the crystal coffee table that had been kicked to the ground. In just a few seconds, the man carried her back to the bedroom and threw her onto the bed. Without hesitation, he leaned over and pressed down on her. "Li Nanheng, be good, I can't control it right now. It's hard to guarantee that I won't hurt you. Cooperate, and..." "How can I cooperate?" Feng Ling was really angry. She raised her hands to push him, but the man held her wrists and forcibly locked them behind her back. Then the man swept down like a scorching storm and directly attacked her with a kiss. After all, it was actually not the first time. Although Feng Ling was shocked by the scene in the study, she did not resist too much, and she knew that she did like this man. But it was really too sudden. She wanted to say something, but he did not give her a chance at all. Moreover, this time was different from the past. In the past, he was only teasing her because he was sentimental. If she refused, he would also respect her and would not really force her to do it. But now, he was really stripping her clothes. "Li Nanheng, calm down. What kind of dirty thing did you eat? Boss, sober up." Li Nanheng, she had only experienced this feeling once. It had been a long time, and even a little strange, tearing pain. Although it was not the first time, after all, it was only once. After so many years, it had not happened again. The pain did not reduce much compared to before. Feng Ling's face instantly turned pale from the pain. She turned her head and bit the man's shoulder, but such a familiar scene caused the man on top of her to suddenly pause. And because of this familiar feeling, the doubts that had been lingering in his mind intermittently like a dream were instantly answered. That night on the snow mountain, it was not that he did not have any impression of it, but it was too vague to remember clearly, and he was not completely sure if it had happened. However, at this moment, Li Nanheng was 100% sure that he had endured for nothing all these years. He had actually skinned this silly girl alive long ago. Chapter 1139. Feng Ling hadn't recovered from the pain. The man gave her time to adapt and didn't move again. He suddenly held her face and kissed her hard on the lips a few more times. He then leaned close to her ear and said hoarsely, "You've hidden it well. You've long been mine, and..." Feng Ling's heart skipped a beat. She raised her eyes abruptly, only to see that the man's dark eyes seemed to be in a particularly good mood. She wanted to speak, but the man sealed her lips again. Pain. It really was not an ordinary pain. Feng Ling even wanted to kill him. Last time on the snow mountain, he was confused because of his illness. In addition, Fat Tai had fed him a lot of alcohol, so he was not sober at all. He couldn't care about her feelings at all. At that time, it was so painful that she wanted to shoot him. Even more so now. This man took advantage of the drug effect, and because he was in a good mood, he became more and more indulgent. Even though in the end, because she couldn't hold on anymore, he still became a little gentler. No matter how gentle he was, it was better to end it earlier, from 11 p.m. to 3 a.m. Feng Ling had never felt so tired even when he dragged her out to do devil training in the base. In a few hours, she felt as though she had died several times. Finally, the man was willing to carry her into the bathroom to take a shower. In the damn bathroom, there was a bathtub that could accommodate the two of them. In the end, when she washed up and lay back on the bed, she felt almost crippled. However, Li Nanheng hugged her and fell asleep contentedly. Feng Ling was indeed tired, but no matter how tired she was, seeing that it was already 4 a.m., she really couldn't sleep. Even her mental state was tense. She was not mentally prepared, nor did she understand why this suddenly happened. At least he didn't remember that time on the snow mountain. Later, she pretended that it didn't happen. Right now, when he woke up in the morning, what should she say or do? The man by her side was sleeping soundly. In fact, Feng Ling had never seen Li Nanheng sleep so unguarded. The two of them had both taken a shower, and their bodies smelled of the same lemon-scented shower gel. She turned to look at his sleeping face. After looking at it for a long time, she recalled everything that happened tonight. Her face began to heat up again. Feng Ling admitted that she was fearless when killing enemies on the battlefield, but when it came to love, she was still a little timid. Taking advantage of the fact that Li Nanheng was asleep, she got out of bed, endured the terrible soreness between her legs, and put on her clothes with her trembling legs. Since it was still dark and there were not many people walking around outside the hotel, she picked up her coat, grabbed a red scarf, wrapped it around her neck and half of her face, and hurried away. Li Nanheng had only slept for about 2 hours when he felt that something was missing in his arms. He frowned in his sleep, turned over, and casually waved his hand to the bedside. He immediately paused and opened his eyes. The sky was already bright, and the time was about 6 o'clock. The man turned his face to the side and looked at the empty bed beside him. He then turned his head to look at the carpet beside him. The clothes he had taken off Feng Ling last night were all gone. She ran away. Li Nanheng immediately sighed with a headache and rubbed between his eyebrows. He recalled how the little woman was almost forced to cry under him last night and kept begging for mercy. The corners of his mouth curved again, and then he raised his eyebrows. He got up, wrapped his lower body with a thin quilt, and went into the bathroom to take a shower. She had already slept with him, and it was not just once. Where else could she run off to? Even if she ran to Africa or the South Pole, he would still be able to catch her and bring her back. Jean Wan called Feng Ling early in the morning. She had stayed up too late at Mr. Kai's house last night and did not know if Feng Ling had applied the medicine on time. She had wanted to say a few words of concern. However, when Feng Ling picked up the call, her tone sounded slightly tired. Yesterday, Feng Ling had said that she could already return to normal work, but today, she said that she might need to rest for another 2 days. Jean Wan immediately agreed and told her to rest well. Feng Ling did not return to other places but directly returned to Wen Liqing's residence. She originally thought that Wen Liqing would be at home, but when she entered, she discovered that the house was covered in dust. It was clear that no one had returned for several days. She did not know if Dr. Wen had returned to America, and Miss Wen had not returned for several days. Right now, Feng Ling was not in the mood to think about other people's matters. After entering the door, she simply wiped the dust everywhere and opened the door of her bedroom tiredly. She went in to take a hot shower. Originally, she wanted to relieve her fatigue, but after the shower, she felt even more sleepy. She did not wait for her hair to dry. After leaving the bathroom, she fell asleep on the bed. After sleeping for a short while, she vaguely heard her phone ring again. She furrowed her brows and flipped over to continue sleeping. She did not pick up the call. Not long after, there seemed to be someone knocking on the door. Feng Ling opened her sleepy eyes and fell into a daze for quite a while. After confirming that someone was really knocking on the door, she climbed up from the bed. She thought it was Miss Wen who came back. Perhaps she did not bring the key, or Dr. Wen came to see Miss Wen. In short, she had thought of all the possibilities. However, when she dragged her extremely sore legs to open the door, she saw the man who pressed her down on the bed and bullied her all night last night. As soon as she saw Li Nanheng standing outside the door, the alarm in Feng Ling's mind rang, and she instinctively wanted to close the door. However, the second before the door was closed, the man raised his hand to block the door. His handsome brows moved slightly, and he looked at her meaningfully through the gap of the door. His voice was low and seemed to contain a hint of a smile. "Why don't you recognize me after you put on your pants after sleeping with me?" Feng Ling, she abruptly let go of the door, and the man directly pushed the door open and entered. What did he mean by disregard me after putting on my pants? Feng Ling glared at him angrily, and because of the soreness between her legs, her eyes were full of displeasure. "What are you doing here? I didn't sleep well last night. Can't you let me find a quiet place to have a good sleep? Isn't it quiet enough to sleep next to me? Didn't I also hug you to sleep peacefully later?" The man said shamelessly as he walked in. Only then did she see that the man was carrying a bag in his hand, which seemed to contain the breakfast he bought from somewhere. She still remembered the shape of the breakfast box and the names of the small shops that sold breakfast downstairs. "Even if you want to sleep, you have to eat first. You didn't eat much last night, and you've been tossing and turning all night. Eat before you sleep." The man placed the breakfast on the dining table for her. Chapter 1140. Feng Ling watched his back view and then glanced at the breakfast he had placed on the table. She paused for a moment before asking, "How did you know I didn't eat anything last night?" Li Nanheng did not answer. He took out the breakfast boxes from the bag and placed them on the table one by one. Of course he knew. Last night, Feng Ling did not know that he was present. However, he knew that ever since she entered Mr. Kai's home, she had been sitting with Jean Wan in the orchid hall. The food she ate was mostly fruits and snacks. She did not like to eat snacks and only ate a little. Even after returning home at night, she still had not eaten. She walked over and saw that the breakfast on the table was all of her usual favorites. The anger in her heart that had not dissipated after being bullied for an entire night instantly subsided. "What are you standing there for? Come and eat." Li Nanheng glanced at her. Feng Ling sat down by the table. As she picked up the cutlery to eat, she asked, "Did you specially come here to apologize?" Li Nanheng glanced at her and saw the obvious red marks on her neck from his excessive indulgence last night. He chuckled heavily. "I slept with my own wife. What do I have to apologize for? Also, I haven't settled the score with you. Back then at Rogers Pass, did I press you down on the bed when I was unconscious? You sure are tight-lipped. After so many years, you still haven't told me the truth." Feng Ling's hand paused. She abruptly raised her head to look at him and slammed the chopsticks down on the table. Seeing that she appeared to be in a bad mood, Li Nanheng's gaze paused on her. "Why are you angry from being bullied? First of all, back then at Rogers Pass, Fat Tai forced you to drink. You didn't remember it at all the next day. I admitted defeat and didn't want to tangle with you over that matter. Secondly, Li Nanheng, I'm not your wife. You keep calling me little wife. It reminds me of the news I saw in Los Angeles 3 years ago. You only said that it was a misunderstanding, but you didn't explain clearly to me what happened. After experiencing last night, I admit defeat, but you..." Before she could finish speaking, a freshly peeled boiled egg was suddenly stuffed into her mouth. Feng Ling, she took the egg out of her mouth and glared at him. Li Nanheng, you won't let me speak. However, Li Nanheng smiled and went to peel another egg. As he peeled it, he said, how is this admitting defeat? It's clear that you've become the master. Even when talking to your boss, you're starting to speak with resentment and anger. Feng Ling was silent for a moment. Eat first. Once you're full, you'll have the strength to listen to me. Li Nanheng peeled the second egg and placed it in the bowl in front of her. Feng Ling glanced at him again. Seeing that he was going to continue peeling if she didn't eat, she lowered her head and took a bite of the egg. After breakfast, Feng Ling was about to get up when the man abruptly pulled a chair over from the other side of the table, threw it in front of her, and then sat down in front of her. The man was tall and had long legs. Just by sitting in front of her, a casual stretch of his long legs was enough to block her way and trap her between his long legs. Repeat what you just said, the man said. Feng Ling looked at him for a while and said directly, I didn't think too much about what happened on the snow mountain back then. It's fine if you don't remember, but it's fine now that you've discovered it. To me, it's not worth mentioning. Li Nanheng's expression turned stern when he heard her words. You're saying that I slept with you back then, but you're so magnanimous that you don't even need to take responsibility. You weren't sober back then. Li Nanheng's gaze immediately turned cold. Clearly, he was dissatisfied. I wasn't sober. So if the one who was injured and wasn't sober was someone else, if you couldn't push the other party away, you would also allow the other party to do that kind of thing to you. In fact, after the matter passed, you wouldn't even hold it in your heart, Feng Ling. Of course it was impossible. If it were anyone else, if they dared to touch her, she would make him bleed on the spot. Continue, the man said coldly. She should be the one who was angry, but seeing Li Nanheng's inexplicably angry expression, Feng Ling watched him for a while before saying, also, what's with your marriage announcement 3 years ago? No matter whether you're married or not, your wife can't be me. So now that you keep calling me little wife, don't you think you're slapping me in the face? I feel uncomfortable just hearing these 3 words. Can you not call me that in the future? At this moment, Li Nanheng sat in front of her and gave her a meaningful look. What else? What else? I think you seem to be very angry. You ran away before the sun rose. Did you run away just because of this? Isn't this enough? At least this is my bottom line. I just want to know the man who treated me like that last night, is he married or unmarried? The man suddenly chuckled, raised his hand, and pinched her face. Feng Ling was hurt and looked at him in confusion. Li Nanheng, what are you doing? I'm not quarreling with you. I'm trying to make it clear to you rationally. However, she had only spoken halfway when the man suddenly reached out and abruptly picked her up. At the same time, as if he felt that it was not enough, he lowered his head and kissed her hard on the lips. She had just eaten breakfast and hadn't rinsed her mouth. The taste of eggs and milk was still in her mouth, but he didn't seem to mind at all. He pressed down on her struggling hands and feet in his arms and kissed her hard for a long time. Then he carried her by the waist and turned to walk to the bedroom. What are you doing? It's broad daylight. Don't mess around. Feng Ling seemed to see some aggression in the man's eyes. She didn't dare to believe that in just a few hours, he would use the excuse of bringing her breakfast early in the morning to behave like a beast. However, the man ignored her resistance and directly pressed her against the small sofa in the bedroom door. He was still 2 or 3 meters away from the bed, but he didn't move closer. He bent down and pressed down on her. At the same time, he held her waist tightly and pressed her against his arms. Feng Ling wondered if the drug effect from last night had not worn off. Why did he suddenly act like a wolf in the middle of his words? She was about to bite him, but the man avoided her mouth at this moment and bent down to whisper in her ear, "Do you want to know why I call you little wife?" These 3 words again. Feng Ling could not struggle in his arms. She raised her hand and hammered his shoulder hard. Don't call me that, you. The man lowered his head and kissed her again. When he kissed her until her whole body was numb, he stroked her soft hair and said hoarsely, "You owe me 3 years of marriage. Do you think you can make up for it with just a few hours last night?" Chapter 1141. Feng Ling didn't understand him at all. What 3 years of wedding night? What compensation? She pushed him, but the man seemed to have gone crazy. Ignoring her bad mood, he hugged her and kissed her again and again as though he couldn't kiss enough. "Li Nanheng, I'm serious. You're crazy. Stop kissing me. Stop kissing me." He picked her up again and pressed her firmly on the bed. After kissing her for a long time, Feng Ling lost her temper and the displeasure in her eyes was gradually replaced by this entanglement. She pushed him with a smile. All right. Let's talk nicely. Don't kiss me. Li Nanheng, behave yourself. Don't touch me, I've been coldly treated by you for so long. I can't even kiss you." The man held her in his arms as he kissed her. It was as though he wanted to embed her into his body. When she was finally kissed helplessly and revealed an expression that didn't know whether to laugh or cry, he gently pecked her slightly red and swollen lips that had been ravaged by him all night and said hoarsely, "Last night, I couldn't control myself because of the drug. Last night doesn't count. Today is the last day of 3 years. I must have a good sleep. Otherwise, I'll feel wronged." "Why are you feeling wronged? Let go. What do you mean by the last day of 3 years? Li Nanheng, you." However, Feng Ling's clothes were quickly stripped by the man again. She angrily hit him hard. "Are you crazy?" The man bit her lips twice. He didn't bite her skin, but it hurt her. When she resisted, he pressed her disobedient hands down again. At the same time, he immobilized her and kissed between her brows, the corner of her eyes, the tip of her nose, the corner of her mouth, and then her lips. When Feng Ling wondered if this man was a dog, he pressed his lips against hers and whispered, "You should have gone crazy long ago. You shouldn't have let you go because you're too young." The man's unique scent rushed into her nostrils. His hand moved away from her chin and moved down her neck. The marks from last night had not faded yet, and under the man's warm palm, a layer of goosebumps appeared on her skin. Just as he had said, the loss of control last night might have had something to do with the drug, but at this moment, the man was filled with love and determination to not let her go so easily. Feng Ling felt as though she had been pressed on a strange acupuncture point by the man's palm. Her strength was dissipating bit by bit, and a moment later, her face turned red from his next action. She blushed and tried to avoid the man's hand, but she couldn't. She could only turn her head away and not look at him. At the same time, she was slightly panting. He moved his lips away slightly and kissed the corner of her mouth again. Then he pressed the tip of his nose against her cheek and said, "Last night was the second time I saw you cry. Do you know what I was thinking when you cried?" Feng Ling bit her lips and glared at him. "Don't say it. A girl who never cries is crying like that under me." The man's hand did not stop for a moment, causing her body to tremble uncontrollably. "At that time, I was thinking, this old man has been in 11 base for so many years. Fortunately, I didn't die so early. If I really have to die, I should die on your body." "Shut up, don't say it." Feng Ling was so angry that she wanted to bite him. However, when she raised her head to bite him, the man bent down and kissed her back. He pressed her harshly on the bed and kissed her harshly. He held her face, which she had been trying to turn away from, and forced her to turn her head to look into his eyes. She saw the reflection of her bare shoulders in his eyes, her uncontrollably blushing face, and a pair of watery eyes that she had never seen from herself before. "Don't hide." The man kissed her. "You're very beautiful." Beautiful. This was the first time this word had appeared in Fong Ling's life dictionary. She had never thought that a person like her, who was rarely feminine, would be related to the word beautiful. In the past, she had only heard others say that she was the kind of woman who was very suitable for having short hair. She was both handsome and beautiful. When people said that she was beautiful, she had only thought that they were sweet and had never thought much about it. However, when she heard the word beautiful from the man she cared about, Fong Ling's heart couldn't help but be moved. However, when she was looking at him, the man suddenly squeezed a strong thigh between her legs and forced her apart. He held her wrists with one hand and used the other to stir up trouble on her body, endlessly. Fong Ling's cheeks were red. The exhaustion from last night had yet to fade. So early in the morning, she had just eaten breakfast, and this man who didn't know when to stop bullying her had already done it several times. It turned out that telling her to eat breakfast was a lie. His real intention was to continue doing it after she was full. She was so tired that she didn't even have the strength to struggle. She didn't even have the strength to shout, but this bastard kept saying that she owed him 3 years. What the hell, 3 years? When did she owe him? Who was she paying for? Was he trying to squeeze her dry so early in the morning? Finally, the battle came to a halt. Fong Ling's thoughts were gone. She leaned against the man's chest and closed her eyes to rest. The man's fingers traced her lips. She felt as though there was an electric current running through her lips. She turned her back to him and just wanted to hurry and sleep well. However, she didn't expect that the movement of her back to the man gave him another opportunity. In Fong Ling's 21 years of pure knowledge, she had never thought that this angle could be used. What happened after that, and how long she was tortured, she couldn't remember at all. She only knew that she kept pushing him and hitting him, but repeatedly softened under the man's kiss. In the last hour, she spent almost all of her time in a coma. She couldn't even wake up. She was so tired that her tears soaked the pillow. She was so tired that she was almost unconscious. She was so tired that she lay on the bed like a corpse. However, he actually still had the strength to wake her up. In the end, he finally let her go. Fong Ling really fell asleep in a second. She didn't want to care about anything else. The world was big, and there was nothing more important than sleeping. Li Nanheng got up and briefly cleaned up the battlefield. Seeing that she was really too tired to move, he didn't force her to get up to take a shower. Instead, he went to the bathroom to wash a hot towel and helped her clean up. After making sure that she slept more comfortably, he didn't continue to torture her. Fong Ling didn't move at all when he wiped her body with the towel. Her body was so soft as though she had no bones. She didn't even want to move a single hair. After Li Nanheng washed up, he returned to the bed and held the little woman who was almost unconscious in his arms. He leaned over and was about to kiss her face when Fong Ling frowned in his arms as though she had been wronged. She said weakly and hoarsely, "Boss, let me go." Seeing this woman who was usually so strong being bullied like a puddle of water, Li Nanheng chuckled and kissed her face. "Go to sleep." Chapter 1142. Fong Ling fell asleep again as if she had heard a special pardon. Or maybe she didn't wake up at all but was tortured by him in her dreams and begged for mercy instinctively. At noon, the curtains in the room were closed and both of them were asleep. Li Nanheng's cell phone suddenly vibrated in his pocket. After vibrating repeatedly for at least 10 minutes, the man impatiently reached out to take the phone, picked it up, and put it by his ear. "Say it quickly. Don't disturb my sleep." The person on the other side of the phone was stunned because he was still sleeping in the daytime, and then said, "Young Masterly, something happened to the Feng family. The elders of our family were called out and haven't come back since early in the morning." Hearing the word Feng family, Li Nanheng lost his patience. What does the Feng family's accident have to do with the Li family? Why were the elders called out? It's about Miss Feng. I heard that she secretly went to China yesterday. I don't know what happened in China, but she was sent back to China by the police overnight. I'm just the housekeeper of the Li family, so I can't ask what happened, but the elders were called out early in the morning. I heard that Miss Feng tried to commit suicide at home, cut her wrists and hit the wall. It's a big deal. The police were fast enough. They returned to the Feng family early in the morning. It could be seen that she was sent back to the United States as soon as she arrived at the police station last night. But if it weren't for the reputation of the Feng family, the police wouldn't have sent her away so easily. Otherwise, this matter wouldn't have ended so easily. She would go back to the Feng family to commit suicide and force the elders of the Li family to come to her. Feng Mingzhu's dangerous move of using her life as a hostage had probably been planned for herself during the 10 hours she flew back to America. "Who asked you to call me?" Li Nanheng asked. The housekeeper of the Li family said anxiously on the phone, "It's Mr. Li." The other 3 elders also sounded very unkind on the other side of the phone. "I don't know what happened, but Miss Feng's suicide should have something to do with you. Otherwise, the elders wouldn't be so angry and asked me to call you and ask you to come back." Li Nanheng was silent for a moment. "I see." After that, he hung up the phone and threw it aside. Then he turned to look at the woman who was sleeping in his arms. He lowered his head and kissed her on the cheek and the tip of her nose. After a while, he whispered in her ear, "I have to go back to the United States for a while. Take a good rest. If you want to go back to Jindu Hotel to recuperate, you can go there directly. If you want to stay here to recuperate, I'll leave a few people here so that no one will disturb you. Don't wander around these days. I'll be back soon." In her drowsiness, Feng Ling heard it and reluctantly grunted in response. However, she still closed her eyes and continued to sleep. When the man lifted the blanket and got up, she turned over and continued to sleep as though the man was not as important as the bed. Li Nanheng turned back to look at this woman who was sleeping soundly and did not have any reluctance to leave. If it weren't for the fact that the old people were in the Feng family and he had to rush back to stabilize the situation, even if he was given another 2 hours, he would definitely wake her up and let her know who her man was. How dare she ignore him again and again? She really deserved to be beaten up. Feng Ling really fell asleep. Even an earthquake might not be able to wake her up. After another 2 hours, she woke up and turned over on the bed, only to feel that her entire body was extremely sore. While secretly cursing that bastard, she slowly moved her legs and felt that the swelling pain was much better than before. Then she turned to look at the empty other side of the bed. She remembered that he said that he had to rush back to the United States for an urgent matter. Based on Li Nanheng's usual style, if it wasn't really an urgent matter, he would definitely still be on her bed and would not leave even if the sky collapsed. Fortunately, he had left. Otherwise, when she woke up, she would definitely suffocate him with a pillow. Otherwise, he would wait for her to recover her strength and have a proper duel. In the few fights last night and this morning, because she was a woman, she was always at a disadvantage. She was bullied to the point that it was useless even if she cried. The more she cried, the more energetic he became. Using the word beast to describe him was not even 1/10 of his viciousness. In the past, when they were in 11 base for so long, other than kissing, hugging, or touching her uncontrollably, he at least had a sense of propriety. But today, this man was like a monster in the dragon prison tower who had finally been released from the seal. Feng Ling lay on the bed for a while. Although she was still very tired, she still couldn't sleep. She struggled to sit up, rubbed her sore waist, picked up her cell phone, and glanced at it. Only then did she see that Jean Wan had sent her a message half an hour ago, asking if she was at home now. She looked up and saw a message that the man had sent her at the airport an hour ago. She opened it and saw that it was a kiss emoji. Phone Ling, she didn't reply but threw the phone back on the bed with a look of disgust. She lifted the quilt, got out of bed, and walked to the living room to find water. The slightly cold water poured into her throat, and the man's words suddenly rang in her mind. Little wife. She owed him a wedding night for 3 years. The last day of 3 years. Her hand holding the quilt suddenly paused. The day before she was kicked out of the base was the day after the news of Li Nanheng and Miss Fang's marriage was spread. The day before 3 years ago, which was today. So what did he mean by the last day of 3 years? She was so resistant to him calling her wife, but he called her that so enthusiastically. And the so-called 3 years, the so-called marriage. Marriage, Miss Fong. Fong Ling's expression suddenly paused. There were only a few young ladies in the Fong family except for Fong Mingzhu, but he repeatedly said that he didn't marry Fong Mingzhu and repeatedly emphasized that he didn't marry any woman, so this Miss Fong didn't exist, or did she exist in another way? Then wasn't the other Miss Fong? Fong Ling couldn't understand this matter. She stood there holding the cup in a daze for a long time but couldn't understand it clearly. The more she thought about it, the more she felt that there couldn't be such a coincidence in this world. And in the eyes of many people, wasn't the second daughter of the Fong family already dead? How was that possible? Just as Fong Ling was holding the cup in a daze, there was suddenly a knock on the door. She turned to open the door, only to see that the person who came was Jean Wan. Chapter 1143. After all, Jean Wan and Mr. Mo were so affectionate every day, so she could see some things at a glance. Seeing that she had been seen, Fong Ling didn't try to hide it, so she didn't hide it. I'm fine. Why are you here? Just as Fong Ling turned around, Jean Wan saw the obvious marks on her neck. Although Mo Jingshan was not easy to deal with in bed, at least he would take care of her feelings most of the time. At least in Jean Wan's eyes, these marks only made her feel that Fong Ling had been raped by someone. Faced with Jean Wan's worried and distressed expression, Fong Ling's own mental state had not recovered. She thought that Li Nanheng might not have expected things to come to this point this morning. It was more or less because of her words that angered him. But now that Jean Wan was here, Fong Ling rationally thought of a more serious problem. She was now Mrs. Mo's bodyguard, and there were more serious jobs and responsibilities waiting for her. It was fine that she was on sick leave these days, but last night and today, she and Li Nanheng didn't seem to use any contraceptive measures. She could only ask Jean Wan for help. The Fong family, Los Angeles, United States. A tall black Hummer was parked outside the Fong family's mansion. The door of the Fong family, which was usually crowded, was closed at this time. Obviously, everyone was in the villa, and there was no one in the yard except for the servants who came out to open the door. Li Nanheng walked in expressionlessly, and the servant didn't dare to speak when she saw Mr. Li. When Li Nanheng walked in and opened the door, he heard the conversation between Grandfather Fong and Grandmother Fong. What should we do? The Li family and the Fong family have been friends for so many years. Why did such a thing happen to the children? Then the third son of the Li family said, "It's okay. Don't worry, Grandfather Fong and sister-in-law. When that brat Nanheng comes back, we'll skin him." Third Grandpa, if you want to skin me, you have to have a good reason. I just got off the plane and haven't eaten a mouthful of hot food yet. The moment I entered the door, I heard you say that you want to skin me. Li Nanheng's voice suddenly sounded, instantly interrupting the conversation between the old men inside. It was already midnight when they flew over from T-City, but the lights in the Feng family's house were still on. Obviously, they hadn't slept yet. Hearing Li Nanheng's voice, Grandfather Feng and Grandmother Feng turned to look at him with anger in their eyes. "You stinking brat, you bullied Mingzhu to such a state, and you still have the nerve to ask for a meal. Oh, since you haven't slept and I'm back, why don't you ask Miss Feng to come out and talk to me face to face? What evil thing did I do to her to force her to come back crying and commit suicide? You even invited the old men of the Li family over. Our old Li had a stroke some time ago and couldn't even get out of bed. Now he has to come here in a wheelchair to stop her from committing suicide." Li Nanheng said as he glanced at Elder Li, who was sitting in a wheelchair with an unfriendly expression. "How dare you say that?" Because of the stroke, although Mr. Li had almost recovered, when he was too anxious and angry, his speech was a little unclear, but he still said angrily, "How on earth did you frame the girl? When Mingzhu came back, she cried and said that she was ruined by you. You framed her and ruined her reputation. She couldn't get married in the future, and she didn't want to live anymore. She cut her wrist with the fruit knife, and the skin was cut. If someone hadn't found it in time, I'm afraid there would have been blood. If she wasn't really desperate, how could this happen? Otherwise, how could she do this?" Li Nanheng put one hand in his trouser pocket, stood where he was, sneered, and looked at the second floor of the villa. If Miss Feng wanted to commit suicide, she could have killed herself in the bathroom of the plane when she was sent back to China. Why did she have to commit suicide in public after returning to the Feng family? Are you afraid that no one will stop you? What are you talking about, Nanheng? Elder Li suddenly frowned and shouted angrily. "Don't hide. The main villa in this house is only so big, and the bedrooms on the second floor are so close. When Miss Feng heard that I came, she must have pricked up her ears. Since I'm here, didn't Miss Feng complain that she can't marry? Don't hide after crying. Come out. Nanheng, Nanheng, we've watched you grow up. Although you've been unruly and overbearing since you were a child, our Feng family always knows that you're a good child. Now you've forced our Mingzhu into this state. Why don't you apologize and even say such harsh words? We only have this granddaughter. Do you really want to force her to death?" Mrs. Feng sat on the sofa and said with a dark expression. "Nanheng, we watched you grow up. Although you've been unruly and overbearing since you were a child, our Feng family always knows that you're a good child. Madam, I know very well how you feel. If I hadn't respected the elders of the Feng family, I wouldn't have come back so quickly," Li Nanheng said. Li Nanheng said, "But there's a reason. Originally, I didn't want the elders to know about this matter, but since Miss Feng threatened me with her life, claimed that she was framed by me, and brought the elders of the Li family here, I'm really sorry. No matter how ugly the truth is, it can't be suppressed." "What do you mean?" Hearing his words, Elder Feng immediately looked at him in confusion. At this time, Feng Mingzhu came out of the bedroom on the second floor, stood at the railing of the stairs on the second floor, and looked at him with a pair of haggard, red and swollen eyes. The scratches on her face were still there, and she looked embarrassed as if she had been bullied. "Nanheng, I know I went to T-City to find you and made you unhappy, but you can't do this to me." As if he didn't hear her aggrieved words, Li Nanheng coldly picked up his cell phone and glanced at it. Seeing that all the videos sent to his mailbox in T-City had been sent to him, he picked up the remote control not far away and turned on the TV in the hall of the Feng family's main residence. "Nanheng, what are you doing?" The elders of the Li family were also puzzled. After Li Nanheng turned on the TV, he casually adjusted something on his cell phone and said calmly and coldly, "Miss Feng, apart from pretending to be weak to slander me, there's really no other way. She cried and tried to commit suicide. What else can she do but use the evidence to speak?" Hearing the evidence, he said, Feng Mingzhu was stunned. The other old people also turned to look at the TV screen in confusion. Chapter 1144. The woman in a gown in the corner, even though she was standing in a dim corner, could still be recognized as Feng Mingzhu from her figure and the bag in her hand. She said something to the waiter in the corner and then took out a bank card and placed it in the waiter's hand. Feng Mingzhu only looked at it for 2 or 3 seconds before her gaze changed and she immediately rushed downstairs. However, she had already fallen in the bathroom yesterday and was then pressed to the ground by Mrs. Liu and beaten for a long time. She ran in a hurry and the servant behind her who was supposed to help her did not keep up. Feng Mingzhu had just run down the stairs when she suddenly fell down 4 or 5 steps from the ground. She fell to the ground in a sorry state and let out a scream that attracted everyone's attention. The 2 elders of the Feng family, the elders of the Li family, and the servants of the Feng family present seemed to understand something when they saw her panic. They all looked in her direction in silence. Feng Mingzhu didn't seem to see everyone's gaze. When the servant hurriedly ran down to help her up, she struggled to stand up. Ignoring the pain in her leg, she pointed in the direction of the TV screen and sobbed. "Don't look. Li Nanheng is framing me. He has long wanted to get rid of the Feng family's shackles. In order to break off with the Feng family, he can do anything. He is framing me." As she spoke, she ran over and spread her arms to block the TV screen. She turned her head with red eyes and looked at everyone's gaze. "Don't look, don't look." Originally, no one understood what Li Nanheng was going to show everyone, but Feng Mingzhu's extreme reaction made the 2 elders of the Feng family hesitate for a moment. They looked at her expression thoughtfully and guessed that their child might really be lying. They did not speak anymore, but now that the Li family was here and Li Nanheng had been called over from thousands of miles away, how could this matter be stopped? When the 2 elders of the Feng family frowned and looked at Feng Mingzhu in confusion, the elders of the Li family also saw something strange in her agitated expression and words. They immediately looked at Li Nanheng, who was standing coldly and quietly by the side, and then at the 2 elders of the Feng family sitting on the sofa. "Since Nanheng said that there is a reason, now that we are all here, let's see what exactly is going on. Don't look, don't look. Nanheng is framing me." Feng Mingzhu looked at Captain Li helplessly with red eyes. "Grandpa Li, believe me, you have to believe me." Sitting in the wheelchair, Grandfather Li glanced at her. After a few seconds of silence, he said, "Miss Feng, you're too emotional. Sit aside and take a rest. Let's see how it goes." Grandpa Li. However, as soon as Old Master Li said this, everyone knew that it was impossible not to play the video on the screen. The helper also walked up and pulled Feng Mingzhu away. "Miss, don't be too agitated." Feng Mingzhu was stunned. "Let me go, don't look. Don't look." Feng Mingzhu was pulled to the side, and everyone's eyes turned to the TV screen again. After taking the card from Feng Mingzhu, the waiter nodded and turned to leave. Then the screen switched to another scene. All the scenes changed to the places where Feng Mingzhu appeared later. After coming out of the corner, Feng Mingzhu did not enter the banquet hall again but went straight to a special lounge above the banquet hall. In the surveillance camera above the corridor, she looked around before entering the room and then pushed the door open and entered the room. After that, the camera didn't change again but stayed in the corridor. During this period, the waiting time was accelerated, but the surveillance time displayed on the upper right corner could be seen. Less than half an hour later, the waiter appeared in the corridor with a bald man with a beer belly and directly helped the man into the room where Feng Mingzhu was. The room the camera was shooting was outside Feng Mingzhu's room. The waiter was obviously the one who had received money half an hour ago, the one who was bribed by Feng Mingzhu herself. Li Nanheng was not seen in the whole process, and this video was enough to let everyone know that no matter what happened, Feng Mingzhu was the one who made the decision and no one set her up. Feng Mingzhu also looked at the process on the screen and suddenly realized what she had experienced. She turned her red eyes to look at Li Nanheng, but the man didn't even look at her. Feng Mingzhu clenched her fists tightly and bit her lips. At this moment, she couldn't say a word. The fear and despair in her heart had already spread to the top of her head. "Miss." The servant, who was standing next to her, felt her body was cold and trembling. She called out to her worriedly and fearfully. The surveillance video on the TV screen was still playing. After the man was helped into the room and the waiter quietly left, the camera switched to the scene where the waiter handed over the bank card. The bank card on the screen was enlarged. Others might not recognize it, but the Feng family recognized it. The pink card indeed belonged to Feng Mingzhu. It was a small card that she usually used, but because the Feng family had a high status in Los Angeles, they also had a certain status in the bank, so the Feng family's bank card would have some special marks that they recognized. Then, the camera switched back to the door of Feng Mingzhu's room. Suddenly, the door was opened, and the scene of Feng Mingzhu hurriedly running out in a bath towel appeared in everyone's eyes. The two elders of the Feng family and the elders of the Li family frowned when they saw her bare shoulders. They were considering whether to continue watching, but at this moment, they saw Li Nanheng's figure finally appear in the camera, but he was just standing outside the corridor. This matter clearly had nothing to do with him from the beginning, but why did he appear outside later? This puzzled everyone, so they continued watching. The more exciting scene was what happened after Mrs. Liu rushed up. It was not until the bath towel on Feng Mingzhu's body was suddenly stripped off that the elders suddenly closed their eyes. At this moment, Grandfather Feng slapped the coffee table heavily. "Enough. Don't play anymore." Hearing her grandfather's angry shout, Feng Mingzhu's almost frozen body stiffened as she watched the nightmarish surveillance video. She looked at Grandfather Feng weakly. Chapter 11:45. I was wondering what had happened. Why would I suddenly be sent back to the United States overnight? And why did the police send me the documents of intentional assault? My family and I were all confused. In the end, Mingzhu, what else do you want to say now? Grandfather Feng was furious, but because this shameful matter was clearly seen by everyone in the Li family, even if he was angry, he could only barely maintain his rationality. He said angrily, "You said it was Nanheng who set me up. He was the one who forced me into a corner and ruined my reputation. You said that Nanheng set me up so that I can't get married in the future. Tell me, what's that in the surveillance video?" Feng Mingzhu opened her mouth and was about to speak when Nanheng said coldly, "Miss Feng, you even used the means of suicide and forced everyone in the Li family to come here. Now you have to give me a reason. Otherwise, do you think it's so easy to get rid of the old men of the Li family? I'm afraid it's easier to invite the devil and then to send the devil away." Feng Mingzhu's expression trembled. She turned to look at the elders and saw that they were all deep in thought. Obviously, they had already guessed some clues about this matter, but they couldn't make a complete conclusion, so they looked at her suspiciously. "Hi, Mingzhu, things have already escalated to the point of suicide. What exactly is going on? Now that Nanheng is also here, this surveillance video, we've all seen it. Things have gotten so out of hand, there's really no way to let it go." At this time, fourth elderly looked at Feng Mingzhu. "Why do I look at the content of this surveillance video? It seems that you bribed the waiter and asked him to do something for you. Did you take a fancy to that big-bellied bald man?" "I didn't." At the mention of CEO Liu, Feng Mingzhu was so disgusted that she had goosebumps all over her body. "That's a misunderstanding." When she said the word misunderstanding, her voice became slightly weaker. She was about to explain, but when she noticed the cold and indifferent gaze that Nanheng sent her, she felt that all the blood in her body was chilled to the bones. She didn't even have a chance to lie or defend herself. This man really didn't intend to save her any face. Feng Mingzhu bit her lip and turned to look at Li Nanheng. Her eyes were red as she said, "Nanheng, must you kill him like this?" Li Nanheng didn't move his brows. He didn't look at her red eyes and just said indifferently, "Before Miss Feng committed suicide, I was still in China and didn't seem to have any intention of returning to the United States to pursue the matter. Who made things so public? Was it me?" Feng Mingzhu, she seemed to have choked for a moment. She opened her mouth but couldn't say a word for a long time. He was the one who beat her at her own game and caused her to be in this state. She cried and threw a tantrum for a reason, but he was the cause of the whole thing. Even if she was unwilling, it seemed that she really couldn't refute him. But Li Nanheng had used this matter to force her to this step. She refused to believe that he hadn't predicted that things would escalate to this point. He clearly knew that she would be sent back to the Huaxia Empire. He clearly knew what would happen next. That was why he had even obtained the surveillance footage of Mr. Kai's home. He had never intended to give her any face. But that was right. He didn't seem to have any feelings for her. Finally understanding the cold-blooded and heartless nature of this man, Feng Mingzhu gripped her sleeves tightly. Her face, which was still red and swollen from the beating, was now completely pale. "Mingzhu, what exactly is going on?" Old Madame Feng sat on the sofa as though she couldn't take the blow. She looked at her and asked, "Did you really bribe that waiter?" I. Feng Mingzhu choked. "Grandma, since Miss Feng can't say anything else aside from wanting to commit suicide and crying that she couldn't get married, then I can only be rude to you too." As Li Nanheng spoke, he transferred a test report from his phone to the television screen. "This is a drug that Miss Feng gave to that waiter last night. It can be mixed into alcohol. Everyone can see the contents of this drug." Everyone turned to the screen again. When they saw the words "India exports aphrodisiac, 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 aphrodisiac," and so on, they instantly frowned in disbelief. This is in Miss Feng's hands. "Miss Feng, do you still need me to continue to explain the situation?" Li Nanheng asked lightly. It sounded like a question, but the man's tone was clearly mocking. Feng Mingzhu suddenly turned to look at him. "Yes. It was me who wanted to drug you. I wanted to have sex with you. So after realizing it, you treated me in this way. You clearly know that my heart has been with you for so many years, and I just like you. No matter what methods I use, I will be the one to suffer losses in this kind of thing. Yet, you beat me at my own game and made me lose face." What? She was using this to drug Li Nanheng. This realization shocked everyone. The elders of the Li family looked at each other without saying anything, but the two elders of the Feng family were so angry that their faces instantly turned green. "Bastard!" Grandfather Feng suddenly said angrily, "Mingzhu, do you know what shame is? Nanheng is still your brother-in-law in name. How dare you? What the hell, brother-in-law? Do I have a sister?" Feng Mingzhu was really provoked. She went home and made a scene, thinking that she could fight for something. Now that things had come to this point, she simply said, "My sister is long dead. A 1-year-old baby, a cenotaph. You are really old and muddle-headed. Are you willing to let Li Nanheng marry her cenotaph?" "I don't have a sister. Brother-in-law. This so-called relationship is all empty in my eyes. I only know that I like him. I liked him many years ago, but in the end, he didn't care about my face and would rather marry a dead soul than look at me. He forced me to this point, and now the 3-year agreement is up. What kind of brother-in-law is he? Grandfather Feng was about to scold, but he was so angry that he couldn't speak. He coughed violently and raised his hands to point at her. He pointed at her for a long time but couldn't say a word. Feng Mingzhu said with red eyes, when the Li family said that they wanted to marry that cenotaph, you only wanted to maintain the relationship between the two families. You only thought that even if it was just a cenotaph, you could at least give my dead sister a home. But did you think about me? I liked him so much. And you want me to call him brother-in-law? I can't do it. Chapter 1146. Even if you can do it, you can't do such a thing. You like Nanheng, but it doesn't mean that he has to accept you. Old Madame Feng stroked her husband's chest and turned back to reprimand him in a warm and angry voice. You've never had a good attitude toward your sister since you were young. Even when we burned some joss paper money for her on some festivals, you didn't like it and smashed things in the room in anger. We're used to this, but hearing these words, our hearts are really cold. Ha! Feng Mingzhu sneered. Do you really treat Nanheng as one of your own? Look at him. I just gave him a cup of medicine, and he used this method to ruin my reputation. Has he ever considered your feelings? Has he ever considered the face of the Feng family and the Li family? Miss Feng. Second elderly frowned and said, the cause of this matter seems to be you. There's no need to push the responsibility to Nanheng. We all saw the whole process. Although Nanheng did not show any mercy, he seemed to be shameless first. Besides, everyone has a bottom line. Anyone would be angry about something like drugging someone. Nanheng is just giving them a taste of their own medicine. He's standing in a passive position. He only knows how to blame others for not showing mercy, but he didn't reflect on himself. Did you call us here just to listen to a person who did something wrong accuse others of not showing mercy? When Feng Mingzhu suddenly heard second elder Li's words, she couldn't argue back. Her face alternated between red and white. Nanheng coldly curved his lips. The biggest mistake Feng Mingzhu made was to bring the elders of the Li family here. The biggest weakness of the four elders of the Li family was the Li family's face. Anyone who hurt the Li family's face was going against them. If this matter was really the Li family's fault, they could only swallow their pride and apologize. But now the truth was here. Instead, Feng Mingzhu was slandering them and threatening to kill herself. This matter had come to this point, she had dragged herself into a dead end. It was really a move for herself, a very fatal move. Clearly, she had also suddenly realized the current situation. Feng Mingzhu's face was pale, but she didn't dare to yell with righteous indignation anymore. She only said aggrievedly, if that's the case, then Nanheng's meaning also represents the Li family's meaning. From the beginning, he didn't care about marrying my sister's cenotaph, but because of the agreement, he wanted to pretend to be a gentleman who kept his word, so he had to marry her, but in fact, he despised her. Now I think he must have someone else in his heart, and he couldn't wait to end this relationship with the Feng family as soon as possible. Now it's the 3rd anniversary. Li Nanheng, you came back not only because of me, but more importantly, to sever this marriage relationship with the Feng family, right? You want the Feng family to be free so that you can be with the person you like. Old Master Li, who had been sitting in the wheelchair for a long time, suddenly said, I always thought that Mingzhu was a good child. I didn't expect such a thing to happen. Hearing Mr. Li's words, everyone fell silent, and Feng Mingzhu looked at him with red eyes. Mr. Li said coldly, in this case, the Feng family has told you about the expiration of the 3-year agreement, and Mingzhu has also made this matter difficult for the two families. After midnight yesterday, the marriage between Nanheng and second Miss Feng will be over. If we want to end this relationship, it's up to us. Now I agree to end it. What do you think, Mr. Feng? When Elderly said this, his tone was very cold. Obviously, he was also angry in his heart. It was only because he was the head of the family that he didn't directly say anything too harsh. However, his meaning was already very clear. He wanted to break up all the relationships between them and return peace to the Li family. Before Mr. Feng spoke, Feng Mingzhu sneered. "See, I'm right, right? The Li family didn't welcome my sister who died early from the beginning, and you insisted on marrying her cenotaph. It's really ridiculous, they didn't take that cenotaph seriously at all." Just when the elders frowned unhappily because of her words, Nanheng said indifferently, "It's true that there is no relationship between me and Miss Feng. You all saw the dispute in Tea City last night. I don't want to explain this kind of thing anymore, but I really want to persuade Mr. and Mrs. Feng to discipline the drill master's granddaughter. Don't take things she likes as her own. I've never been interested in Miss Feng. She deserved the drug. I just beat her at her own game. If she didn't take the lead, she wouldn't have been disgraced. After today, even if she commits suicide, it has nothing to do with the Li family." It was rare to hear Li Nanheng speak so much all of a sudden. Furthermore, from his tone, which had always been unruly, it seemed that he had no intention of breaking up with them. Instead, he was polite, reasonable, and somewhat respectful. They could tell that he had something else to say, so no one interrupted him. In addition, Miss Feng has another conclusion. I have to seriously refute it. The elders of the Li family are all here now. They feel ashamed of what she did, so they said to end the relationship, but I think Mr. and Mrs. Feng should know whether the Li family treats Miss Feng's cenotaph kindly or not. The Li family has long buried Miss Feng's cenotaph in their own place and has long accepted her as their family. Li Nanheng said lightly, "What happened today is just a small episode because of Miss Feng's accidental mistake. There's no need to make it too complicated. In order not to affect the relationship between the two families in the Chinese community of Los Angeles, I am willing to continue to marry Miss Feng. In order to show my sincerity, I will never marry another woman." Never marry another woman. Everyone in the room was stunned by Li Nanheng's serious and dignified words. The two elders of the Feng family instantly felt a little better, but they still looked at him in disbelief. At this time, the elders of the Li family looked terrible, and Mr. Li said angrily, "Nanheng, what do you mean by never marry another woman? Even if our Li family cherishes that child's cenotaph very much, it's expired now. Why do you want to renew it? Why don't you marry another woman?" Feng Mingzhu was also shocked. It was not good to be slapped in the face again and again. At this moment, she stood there in disbelief, thinking that she had heard wrong. "Nanheng, this." Mr. and Mrs. Feng stood up at this time. "If you take back what you said just now, we won't mind. After all, this time, it was our Feng family's fault." Aren't you just reluctant to part with that child who died early? But she still died. She will never come back. Speaking of this, Feng Mingzhu glared at him hatefully with her red eyes and said, "She just can't come back. She's dead. She has been fed to the fish in the sea, and not even her bones are left." Even if Li Nanheng really wants to maintain his **T marriage with her, she is just a dead soul. How ridiculous. A group of people is wasting their feelings on a dead person who has long disappeared. Paw. Another heavy slap. This time, Grandfather Feng was really ruthless. As he slapped her, he was so angry that he raised his hand to his chest and almost couldn't breathe. Feng Mingzhu's already scarred face was now covered with a clear finger mark, and the blood coming out of the corner of her mouth made her face even more frighteningly pale. 4M. Chapter 1148. Old man, don't be angry. Your heart can't take it. Grandma Fong hurriedly came over and grabbed his hand when he was about to slap her again. No matter what Mingzhu did wrong, she is still our child. You can't hit her so hard. I just slapped her twice to teach her a lesson and let her know what shame is. I didn't use the family law. Grandfather Fong said angrily. Family law. Fong Mingzhu recalled that when she was very young, her parents had accidentally dropped her younger sister into the sea on a cruise. When they returned home and found out what had happened, they were so angry, hateful, and in pain that they had nowhere to vent their anger. In the end, they took out an old rattan and whipped her father's back. She remembered that at that time, he had been whipped until his back was bloody. It could be seen that everyone's heart was even more bloody than this. But so what? No matter how sad this group of people were for the sake of that early death. In the end, she was still an early death. Fong Mingzhu looked at them coldly and didn't say a word. She turned and let the servant help her up the stairs without looking back. The Li family. The car stopped. As soon as they entered the house, Grandfather Li said unhappily, "The rest of you can leave first. I have something to say to Nanheng." Logically speaking, after seeing them come back, Li Nanheng should not enter the door but drive away to 11 base or go somewhere else. However, this time, he clearly did not intend to leave immediately. After all, they were grandfather and grandson, so they could see his purpose. They knew that Li Nanheng had something to say and came prepared. The servant sent the other 3 elders away until only Grandfather Li, who was sitting in a wheelchair, and Li Nanheng, who had just entered the door, were left in the front hall of the Li family. Tell me, I want to hear how you are going to explain to me about the vow that you will never marry again. What do you think? Old Master Li said, resisting the urge to smash the folding cane beside the wheelchair into his face. You are the only grandson of the Li family. We don't force you to give birth to a son before we have one. Even if it is a granddaughter, at least we can see our great-grandchildren. But you don't even plan to get married again. Are you deliberately making fun of us? Hearing the old man's angry words, Li Nanheng calmly and coldly threw a stack of documents on the table beside him. Grandfather Li turned to see the sealed document, glanced at him suspiciously, and didn't ask more. He picked up the document and opened it. After pulling it out, he saw several DNA medical test reports. There were new and old blood comparison reports and hair DNA comparison reports. After reading it, he saw the name written at the bottom. Grandfather Li fell silent and was stunned for a long time before he suddenly raised his eyes to look at him. This is, Li Nanheng, these DNA comparison reports are not detailed enough. Fong Ling, who was cruelly driven out of 11 base by you and the other 3 elders, is the second Miss Fong who the Fong family thought died in the sea. She was lucky and didn't die. I guess she fell on some floating object on the sea and drifted to the coast and jungle closest to the sea. She was fed by wolves in the jungle and didn't come out until she was 5 years old. Because of the environment she lived in since she was a child, she only knew how to live. Later, she accidentally entered 11 base. She didn't have any extra thoughts or bad intentions. She just liked the environment there and wanted to live a good life in 11 base. You've seen all her hard work and achievements in the base for so many years. You know how seriously she lived. However, you still destroyed her way of life, trampled on her dignity and everything under your feet, drove her out, and forced her into a corner. Did you think that just 3 years ago today, I stood in the ancestral hall of the Li family and peeled an apple for her, but you tore everything she had into pieces and drove her out of the base? How is it possible? Grandfather Li frowned in disbelief. How could she? I didn't believe this kind of coincidence at first, but all the coincidences were implicated, so I went to collect her previous blood samples and sent them to compare with the newly collected blood samples and hair, Li Nanheng said coldly. Li Nanheng said coldly, in order to find this child miraculously, the Feng family left their DNA records and certificates in the DNA blood bank early on. After all kinds of comparisons, everything points to the only truth. Feng Ling is the second daughter of the Feng family, my wife, and your granddaughter-in-law. Grandfather Li clenched the thin but heavy pieces of paper in his hand. He recalled the day 3 years ago when he had gone to 11 base to kick Feng Mingzhu out of anger because of her instigation and exaggerated description. But if that girl was the second daughter of the Feng family, then, Grandfather Li suddenly asked coldly, you knew long ago that she was Feng Mingzhu's biological sister. I didn't know 3 years ago. I just found out recently, Li Nanheng answered frankly and did not lie at all. Since you know, you can see that the Feng family is very guilty of missing this second daughter. Why didn't you tell them, not even in front of the Feng family today? Feng Ling is used to living outside since she was a child. The Feng family's big mansion will only be a shackle to her. She is not willing to go back and acknowledge her. This layer of paper has not been pierced, and I will not ignore her own thoughts and reveal half a word to the Feng family. Li Nanheng said, whether she wants to go back or not is her own business. None of us has the right to help her push all this. If she wants to go back, she can stand in front of the Feng family's villa now. I can help her eliminate all the obstacles in front of the Feng family, including Feng Mingzhu. However, she doesn't want to go back. Old Master Li could understand this. When he saw Feng Ling lying on the ground in the base, although she was drunk, he could see that she was a girl with her own ideas and a very distinct personality. Although she was dressed in a boy's clothes and looked very handsome, she was still a girl. She could go through the wind and rain in 11 base for so long without being discovered, which showed that she was a person with a tough personality. Such a person with such a personality could not be easily changed. Her own life plan could not be changed by any small episode. As long as she didn't want to, even if she was the president's daughter, she would rather be free outside. It was really difficult for ordinary people to deal with this kind of girl's personality. 4M. Chapter 1149. After all, the incident of driving Feng Ling out caused Li Nanheng to almost cut off contact with his family. If he hadn't been seriously ill this time, he would have been willing to come back. Otherwise, he would have lost this grandson. Grandfather Li thought for a moment and asked, so what's your plan now? I don't have any plan. I just want to make an agreement with you. Sure enough, he came prepared. What agreement? Tell me about it. Grandfather Li looked at him. Li Nanheng's tone was light but clear. From now on, the Li family is not allowed to interfere with the relationship between Feng Ling and me, including whether she will stay in 11 base or not. You and the other 3 can't continue to be in charge of the family at your age, and you don't trust my cousins, so you insist that I come back. If you want me to completely take over the Li Corporation, I can, but the only condition is my marriage with Feng Ling. Grandfather Li understood the meaning of his words and frowned unhappily. The Li Corporation is there. No matter how old you are still healthy and definitely have the ability to wait until I get married. If you want me to take over, wait until I officially marry Feng Ling. Grandfather Li instantly threw the stack of documents in his hand on the table. How dare you threaten me? Li Nanheng smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. Compared to what you did to Feng Ling 3 years ago, I'm only threatening you with this matter now. No matter whether it is directly or indirectly, this matter is beneficial to you. Just by doing this, I have already left enough faith and affection between us. You don't agree. Li Nanheng looked at the angry grandfather and asked with a smile, not surprised at all. Seeing his confident look, Grandfather Li was even more angry and his face became gloomy. You brat, you've laid out all kinds of conditions here. If Feng Ling is really that child of the Feng family, there's indeed no need for me to interfere. You've blocked all my words. Even if I don't agree, do you think I'll seek death like a girl? Grandfather Li said angrily. Who would have thought that after so many years of nurturing by these crafty old foxes, this kid would not do anything other than fooling around when he returned home. But when he really wanted to be serious with someone, no one would be able to pull him back. Thinking back to how Feng Ling had fallen into the sea back then, even old men like them felt sorry for her. In addition, he drove her out of the base 3 years ago, and compared with all the things now, he did feel a little guilty. That child didn't die after falling into the sea, nor did she starve to death in the jungle. As a girl, she pretended to be a man and risked her life in 11 base. I think she's very tough. Our Li family is tough, so I don't mind if she's tough. But in my opinion, it won't be so easy for you to marry this girl. I don't like the girl who is easy to marry, and she is the only one who is not easy to marry. Li Nanheng suddenly chuckled. No matter what, she is my wife. She can't run away in this life. Old Master Li was so jealous that his teeth were about to fall off. Originally, he had only accepted it because he was threatened. Now, he rolled his eyes at him as if he couldn't bear it. If you have the ability, you can directly make the girl pregnant and bring back a child. If you have the ability to make the girl give me a grandson or granddaughter within a year, I will call you Grandpa. Li Nanheng sneered. You want to bet? Why? Can't I bet? Bet what? If you can give me a great-grandchild within a year, we won't interfere with your affairs in the future, but if you can't do it within a year, we don't care about Feng Ling's relationship. You can marry whoever you want, but you must be dismissed from 11 base after a year and go back to the Li Corporation. No matter how much you don't like to work in the business world, we still plan to leave 11 base to Ah Feng and the others. Stay away from those bullets in the future. Grandfather Li was trying to goad him into action. If Li Nanheng really got married and had children, he would restrain himself. At least, he would cherish his life. He would not rush into any dangerous mission without hesitation. He had to think about his wife and children. However, if he lost, the result would also be the same. After all, every path was a way that Grandfather Li hoped he could leave 11 base. That was just a place to train people, but not a place that Li Nanheng had been guarding with his life. How could Li Nanheng not see through Grandfather Li's intention? He just smiled and did not say much. He made a gesture of agreement to Grandfather Li, put his hands in his trouser pockets, and turned to walk out. However, as soon as he walked out of the Li family's house, he suddenly received a call from a bodyguard in T-City. Boss, when we were guarding near Feng Ling's residence today, we saw Mrs. Mo came to see her. Yes, what happened to Mrs. Mo? Jin Wan was not dangerous at all. If there were no special circumstances, the bodyguard would not call so late at night. We saw Mrs. Mo go upstairs for a while and go downstairs soon after, and it seemed that she was in a hurry. After coming out, she went to a nearby pharmacy, bought some things, and quickly went back. The bodyguard paused and then said, later, our people went to the pharmacy and asked, only to know that Mrs. Mo went to buy a box of emergency contraceptive pills. Li Nanheng was about to open the car door, but when he heard the words contraceptive pills, he suddenly stopped. His eyes narrowed. Jin Wan and Mo Jingshan were very attached to each other. They were legally married, and it was normal for them to have a child. It was impossible for them to have contraceptive pills. She went to see Feng Ling, ran out to buy it, and then went back. It went without saying who this medicine was for. Feeling that the pressure on the other side of the phone was a little cold, the bodyguard said cautiously, "We have been calling you, boss, but you were on the plane and couldn't get through after flying for more than 10 hours. It had been so long." The implication was that Fong Ling had had that medicine for more than 10 hours, and it was very likely that she had taken it. At the thought that the first thing Fong Ling did after he left was to take contraceptive pills, Li Nanheng's face darkened. When he left, although she was not fully awake, he had told her that there was an emergency, so he had to fly back to America. He did not leave her there alone after sleeping. When she woke up, did she think that he ran away after sleeping, so she angrily asked Jean Wan to help her buy that kind of medicine. Contraceptive pills. Damn, if she dared to take that kind of medicine because of this inexplicable misunderstanding, he would fly over and kill her and Jean Wan who helped her buy the medicine. Chapter 1150. Now that he had returned to the United States, he had to go back to 11 Base to take a look. Even though Li Nanheng couldn't wait to fly back to T-City, it was already late at night, and the only direct flight from Los Angeles to T-City was at dawn, which was the earliest. If he used the base's helicopter because of this private matter, Fong Ling would probably take the contraceptive pill in front of him in anger even if she didn't really take the contraceptive pill. Li Nanheng took a look at the time. At this time, Fong Ling should have gone to bed. She didn't sleep much last night and in the morning. No matter how strong she was, it was impossible for her to stay up at this time. He endured it, threw the phone into his pocket, and went back to 11 Base. In the base, he kicked Fat Tai, who was sleeping like a dead pig, awake and asked him a few questions about what happened on Rogers Pass, as well as what happened after he had a high fever and fainted, and Fat Tai forced him to drink. Although Fat Tai didn't have a deep impression of that incident, seeing Boss Li's furious expression, he hurriedly tried to sort out his memories and answered every question Boss asked him. When Boss asked about Fong Ling's situation in the days after that day, Fat Tai just said that he really couldn't remember clearly, but it seemed that Fong Ling often lay down to sleep in those days. He rarely saw her lying down for so long, but she did seem to be in poor condition in those days. Li Nanheng didn't know he was not sober at that time and lost his mind. Besides, he had a high fever and drank a bottle of wine. She was young, and it was her first time, so it would be strange if she was in good condition. When he thought about how he couldn't recall that incident, and then thought about all the delays and hesitations he'd had in the past 3 years, he couldn't wait to ruthlessly punch himself in the head, so he directly punched Fat Tai in the head first. "Ah, boss, what are you doing? Go away." Li Nanheng looked at Fatty's sleepy expression. Fat Tai was still yawning even after being punched, so he couldn't be bothered to say more. "Oh, then I'll go back to sleep, boss." Fat Tai didn't understand why Boss suddenly punched him. It was a little painful, but fortunately, it was not particularly painful, so he scratched his head and went back. Li Nanheng was about to go to the base hall. Suddenly, a hasty alarm sounded in the base. Li Nanheng, who had just picked up a cigarette and was about to put it in his mouth, paused, and turned to look at the alarm in the base hall. He dropped the cigarette and walked over quickly. There were several types of alarms in 11 Base. The one that sounded just now was a special alarm. It was one of the alarms that would never sound unless something major happened. The red light on the top of the base hall also indicated the degree of emergency. Many members of the base were awakened by the alarm and hurriedly got out of bed to get ready. After getting dressed, they hurriedly went out and asked, "What happened?" This kind of alarm hasn't sounded for at least a few years. Did terrorists attack our base? A group of people asked until someone went to the base hall and returned. They finally got the answer. Something happened in Cambodia. A group of local Cambodian drug dealers led by Akib and Dolly captured the important members of 11 Base and their wives and children. They threatened the innocent women and children, contacted the leaders of 11 Base, and set up a heavy ambush in Cambodia. They wanted them to take Mr. Ntiro, the think tank behind 11 Base, Mo Jingshan, as an exchange. If Mo Jingshan didn't show up in 3 days, they would throw those innocent women and children into the minefield and blow them to pieces. The Mo family had been in business for generations, and their family was also involved in politics. The Mo family's elder remembered that his ancestors had suffered greatly when they fought with the underworld. He had also learned from Mo Jingshan that he was involved in the underground arms trade and had forced him to swear that he would never be involved in the underworld or stain his hands with blood. Indeed, Mo Jingshan did not need to be stained with blood. He already had a pair of hands that could turn the clouds and rain with a flip of the hand. To avoid suspicion, Ntro was the alias Mo Jingshan used when he was in the underground arms trade. Those people in the underworld knew his real name but were used to calling him Mr. Ntro. The huge forces behind Akib and Dolly had long since been disintegrated. They were the branch that had escaped, a very ambitious branch. The few people who had escaped were the backbone of that group, so even if they were just a branch of a team, they had to be dealt with carefully. And now they directly kidnapped many innocent women and children, who were the families of many old members of 11 Base who had left 11 Base because of the old age. This matter attracted the absolute attention of 11 Base, and Li Nanheng couldn't go to T-City now because of this matter. He had to go to Cambodia immediately. The news that something happened in Cambodia was directly passed to Fong Ling's ears the next day. Because the people Li Nanheng left with her were all from 11 Base, they would soon know what had happened. And because they knew Fong Ling's existence and status in 11 Base, they didn't hide anything from her. At this time, if Li Nanheng abandoned the things in the base and flew back to T-City immediately, Fong Ling would really be angry. What she was most concerned about now was Jean Wan. Mr. Mo seemed to have left early this morning. He probably wouldn't tell Jean Wan the reason. She didn't know how the situation in Cambodia would develop, but she had been in contact with people like Akib and Dolly. They were very sinister and cunning, and more of them were vicious. Those people spoke the Khmer language of Cambodia every day, but every word and sentence was more poisonous than a poisonous snake, which made people shudder. Now she had to calm Jean Wan down first. Before she knew the situation, she couldn't let Jean Wan notice any clues. Before Mr. Mo left, he did send a message to her, asking her to stay with Jean Wan. Fong Ling rushed back to T University to accompany Jean Wan and stayed close to her. However, the news was still known by Jean Wan 3 days later. Moreover, when Jean Wan learned the news, a worse news had just been confirmed by all of them. Mr. Mo was missing. This was bad news for Jean Wan, but she was just puzzled at that time. She didn't even know the relationship between Mo Jingshan and 11 Base, or the relationship between him and those underground arms deals, let alone why he disappeared when he went to Cambodia to handle some affairs. She finally calmed Jean Wan down, or rather, because Jean Wan was strong enough, she calmed herself down and accompanied Jean Wan back to High City. Chapter 1151. Fong Ling thought that since she had experienced so many dangers in 11 Base, she should be able to stabilize Jean Wan's mood. But what she didn't expect was that Jean Wan was pregnant at this time. Fong Ling wanted to go to Cambodia to help because she learned that several of Dolly's snipers were good at shooting. After all, she used to be a member of 11 Base's sniper team. She called Kay and Kay said she could go there, so she told him everything about Jean Wan. She was very anxious about Jean Wan's pregnancy and wanted Mr. Mo to come back safely as soon as possible. It didn't feel good to wait here all the time. She had the ability, so she just wanted to go to Cambodia to fight. However, what she didn't expect was that Jean Wan, a woman who had just become pregnant and who vomited every day when she felt uncomfortable, had the ability to avoid their sight and sneak onto the same plane as them for her husband. The plane landed in Cambodia, and Phong Ling was about to get off the plane when she saw Jean Wan. How could this be? Jean Wan was a pregnant woman. How could she appear in such a place? Phong Ling was very angry and annoyed that she failed to keep an eye on her, so she forced Jean Wan to take her away and help her book a flight back to High City. She could understand Jean Wan's mood. Jean Wan asked her, if it were her, could she stay in High City at ease? The answer was, of course, no. No one could keep waiting like this with a clear conscience. She tried to persuade Jean Wan again and again, even though she knew that her words were useless. Jean Wan said, but Mo Jingshan is here. Her voice was not high, but every word she said was firm. Just when Jean Wan was about to agree to leave Cambodia because of Phong Ling's pretense of indifference, suddenly, a cold voice came from not far away. What's the matter? The two of them turned around and saw Li Nanheng approaching. Why was he at the Cambodian airport? Shouldn't he be at the camp on the other side of Tunnel Sap Lake? However, just a few days ago, Phong Ling had just been bullied by this man. Her expression froze for a moment, especially when she saw the coldness in his eyes. She thought he was blaming her for her incompetence because Jean Wan appeared here, so she subconsciously explained, sorry, I didn't expect Mrs. Mo to get on the plane with us. I'll send her back to High City as soon as possible. Of course, Li Nanheng's coldness was not because of Jean Wan's appearance here. Everyone could see the love between Jean Wan and Mo Jingshan. If she could calmly stay in High City and enjoy the fruits of others fighting to save her husband, she would not be the woman Mo Jingshan would care about. Even if she came, it wouldn't be a problem, so it wasn't a big deal. He hadn't forgotten that Phong Ling had asked Jean Wan to buy contraceptive pills for her. These days, he had to rush to Cambodia. He hadn't had time to settle the score with her, but now she had flown over and bumped into him. Li Nanheng's gaze shifted coldly from Phong Ling's face to Jean Wan. What are you doing here? Mo Jingshan is here. Jean Wan's eyes were calm. He watched her for a while and then glanced at Phong Ling. She didn't know if he was being sarcastic or unintentional. It wasn't easy to get on the plane under your nose. Phong Ling, if it were before, when she was mocked by him like this in the base, she would at most admit that it was her dereliction of duty. But now facing this man, she just put on a cold expression and couldn't even smile. It seems that in terms of bravery, Jean Wan is definitely not as good as you, but in terms of wisdom, I think Jean Wan may be slightly better than you. Jean Wan, Phong Ling. She scolded him for being stupid, the other brothers who followed her. Boss, what's wrong with you? How can you still be in the mood to mock Phong Ling at this time? Don't you see that Mrs. Mo's face is even more bitter than Huang Lian? Phong Ling put on a cold face and didn't want to talk to him. I'll have Kay send Mrs. Mo back. She's already here. How can we send her back? She landed in High City today and will find a way to fly back tomorrow morning. At that time, I'm afraid Mo Jingshan will not be the only one missing, Li Nanheng said coldly. Li Nanheng said coldly, she is trying to avoid our sight and stay in Cambodia, or standing in front of us safely. Which one is more worrisome? Phong Ling frowned. But it's too dangerous here. Before she flew here, she knew better than you that she would face many unknown dangers. She is not a child. She can accept and bear the choices she made. What are you worried about? Li Nanheng said and looked at Jean Wan lightly. We don't have much time. Go back to High City or stay here. I'll give you one last choice. I'll stay. Jean Wan didn't hesitate. Phong Ling frowned. But Mrs. Mo, you are pregnant, Hearing the word pregnant, Li Nanheng suddenly glanced at Jin Wan and then at her belly. After a moment, Li Nanheng asked, Jin Wan, are you afraid of death? No. Seeing the determination in Jin Wan's eyes, Li Nanheng narrowed his eyes and wanted to say, you are pregnant. How dare you buy contraceptive pills for my wife? Of course, he just scolded her in his heart. Li Nanheng looked at her coldly, lit a cigarette, put it in the corner, narrowed his eyes, and turned his head. Follow me. Then Jin Wan was taken to their camp near Tunnel Sap Lake in Cambodia. After arriving at the camp, Li Nanheng asked Fong Ling to send her to a small room in the camp to rest on behalf of Mrs. Mo, and Fong Ling took her in. Jin Wan was in a good mood. Although she didn't know Mo Jingshan's identity, she was very receptive. Now that she was taken in here, she felt closer to Mo Jingshan, so she didn't show any emotion on her face. Seeing that Jin Wan was very rational and had probably thought through a lot of things before coming here, Fong Ling didn't say anything more. After settling her down, she turned and walked out. When they got outside, Kay and the others were discussing the countermeasures to break in, but because the woods were surrounded by dense minefields, it was very difficult to break in, and they were not familiar with the terrain here. They could only be sure that Mr. Mo was trapped in it and was not in danger for the time being, but in order to ensure that Dolly and the others wouldn't hurt him, they had to think of a foolproof way. Chapter 1152. He didn't need to look back to know who was looking at him. After all, Boss Lee was also outside at this moment. Kay put down his hand with a strong desire to live. In order to cover up his embarrassment, he rubbed his hand on his clothes and made a scratching gesture. Then he smiled and bumped Fong Ling's arm with his bent arm. How is it? You've been a bodyguard for so long. One moment, you're the mayor's daughter, and the next moment, you're Mrs. Mo's. Do you feel comfortable? Is it more comfortable to come back to be with us brothers? Fong Ling didn't take this step at all and directly answered, it's all good. They are all very good to me. It's very comfortable and comfortable. Kay, no wonder you're so heartless. You've already gotten back the face you lost. It's time for you to come back. Fong Ling glanced at the sniper rifle in Kay's hand. In fact, I'm also a very troublesome existence for 11 base. After all, the rules and regulations can't be disrupted because of me. Even if the higher-ups give me a suitable identity, I'm not qualified to be a drill master. I don't want to make the brothers in the other teams secretly unhappy because of my special identity, which will only make the brothers in the base unable to work together. But I will also remember the kindness of the base. If you need me, I will not hesitate to come back. Just like now, as long as you give me a gun, I can risk my life for 11 base at any time. Kay tooted. Humph, who wants you to risk your life? We just miss you. How good the days were when the 5 of us were together. Don't you miss us? I miss you, but life always goes on. People can't always look back and think about the past. As long as we are still alive, we can see each other whenever we want. We don't have to maintain the relationship of standing in a row every day to train in the base. After going out for a few years, you've become much more eloquent. In the past, you didn't even bother to explain anything to us, but now you even know how to say such polite words. Kay snorted. Fong Ling chuckled. It's not polite words. I mean it. We can see each other whenever we want. After chatting for a while, Fong Ling was about to go to the team to get a gun, but perhaps because she hadn't been too close to these people for a long time, she suddenly appeared in front of them. When she passed by, everyone glanced at her. What are you looking at? Haven't you seen a woman before? Li Nanheng went to get a gun suitable for her. When he caught a glimpse of those people's eyes, his face turned cold. Everyone, I've never seen such a feminine Feng Ling. In fact, Feng Ling's change was not particularly big, but perhaps because she had been outside for a long time and hadn't deliberately disguised as a man for 3 years, the feeling she gave people was very natural. When she was natural, it could be seen that she only had short hair, but she was really a woman from head to toe. In particular, Feng Ling habitually wore a scarf around her neck to cover up the traces that hadn't disappeared in the past 3 or 4 days. Although Cambodia was a very troublesome place and everyone was wearing short-sleeved shirts, she did not take off her scarf. The rare red color on her body made her particularly attractive to men. Li Nanhing frowned coldly and glanced at Feng Ling indifferently. "Why are you standing there? Did I ask you to come here to be admired?" "Feng Ling, did this man eat a bomb?" However, Li Nanhing glanced at the scarf around her neck and seemed to guess what she was covering. Although he was still unhappy because of the contraceptive pills, when he thought of the traces he left on her body, he felt a little better, but he just threw the gun into his hand and turned away with a dark face. At night. In the camp, several groups of people were responsible for patrolling at different times to ensure the safety and vigilance around the camp. Feng Ling had just finished patrolling with Kay and the others outside, and it was already past 10:00 in the evening when the next group of people came. Cambodia was indeed very hot. She felt uncomfortable wearing the scarf, but she didn't take it off. The others asked her why she kept wearing it, and she casually explained that she accidentally hurt her neck a few days ago. Her cervical vertebra was injured, so she couldn't be exposed to the wind, so she wore it. But when she returned to the small room in the camp, she finally took off the scarf after entering the door and closing the door. It was so hot that she was sweating all over. She quickly scrubbed and felt refreshed and comfortable before picking up a new black short-sleeved t-shirt that Kay had given her. This small room was divided into small rooms, very simple and crude, and there was no mirror. She picked up her cell phone and looked at her neck, only to see that the traces near her collarbone were still there, and there was also a little trace on the front of her neck. Normally, it had been 3 days, and all the traces should have disappeared, but Li Nanhing, that beast, probably wanted to eat her. The traces left on her body had only faded a little, but when she looked carefully, she could still see that they were all kiss marks. But it was not appropriate to keep wearing the scarf like this. Today, because she had just flown from High City, she didn't have time to change her clothes. She had been so stuffy all day, so she definitely wouldn't wear it tomorrow. She might have to find a way to get some plasters or bandages from others to cover her wounds. She hurriedly tidied up her clothes because she felt that these clothes were sweaty, so she took them out to wash. When she was washing clothes, Tam happened to come out to wash his pants. When he saw Feng Ling, he said, "I saw that the cell phone you used in the afternoon is the same model as mine. The charger I brought seems to be broken. Did you bring your cell phone charger? Lend it to me." "Yes, I'll get it for you later." Feng Ling wrung the clothes dry, hung them on the drying pole outside, and walked quickly inside, ready to help Tam get the charger. However, when she walked to the door of the small room where she lived temporarily, she suddenly saw the opposite door open. She didn't know who lived opposite, so she pushed the door open and turned to enter her room. But when she was about to close the door, she suddenly felt a force coming from the door to stop her from closing it. She turned her eyes, only to see Li Nanheng's face colliding into her sight. The man's eyes were very unkind, as if he wanted to settle accounts with her. He pushed the door open and walked in. The moment Feng Ling saw the man's cold gaze and the way he suddenly barged in, the scene of her being pressed on the bed by him a few days ago was still vivid in her mind. Feng Ling subconsciously took a step back, but the room was too small. After taking a step, she was already at the bedside. Her legs were blocked by the bed and she asked, "What are you doing?" Chapter 1153. Don't you know what I'm doing? Li Nanheng caught her as she almost fell back on the bed. To prevent himself from doing something to her after pressing her on the bed, he turned around and pressed her against the door. At the same time, when she was about to struggle, he raised his hand and locked the door from the inside. Surrounded by the man's breath and hearing the sound of the door being locked, Feng Ling's movement stiffened. She looked incredulously at the cold, hard, and handsome face in front of her. The man didn't give her a chance to reprimand him. He raised his hand and pinched her chin, forcing her to look into his eyes, and said in a low voice, "Did you take the medicine?" Feng Ling was puzzled and stared at him. "What medicine?" Li Nanheng pinched her chin and the words were almost squeezed out from between his teeth. "Contraceptive pills." Feng Ling, how did he know that she bought that kind of thing? Since Jin Wan would buy it for her, she definitely wouldn't tell this kind of thing to Li Nanheng. And at that time, Jin Wan clearly thought that she was raped by Li Nanheng and was very dissatisfied with what he did, so she definitely wouldn't tell him. Then how did he know? Feng Ling stared at him blankly for a few seconds before her eyes flickered and she responded, "N." Then she lowered her head and was about to slip out of the confinement circle between his body and the door. However, when the man heard her "N," he seemed to be instantly angered. He pinched her chin, and his grip was much stronger than before. At the same time, his eyes were bursting with anger. "Why did you take the medicine? Even if you're really pregnant, I didn't King say that I won't take responsibility. You're not a child. You're of marriageable age. Are you afraid of pregnancy? Feng Ling, speak. Do you want me to be so irritable every time I talk to you? Tell me, why did you take the medicine?" Li Nanheng was so angry that he wanted to break her chin. It was not because of the bet between him and grandfather Li about whether he could have a great-grandchild within a year, but because he loved her, he would do it. If she was really pregnant, he would do it. He had never felt that there would be anyone else between him and Feng Ling. Everything could be done naturally because of their relationship. In the future, if she really needed him to take contraceptive measures, he could be careful and avoid it, but if she was really pregnant, he would do it. There was no need to take any medicine at all. That kind of medicine was very harmful to women. How could she take the medicine so easily after he turned to fly back to the United States? How could she be so cold to take it? Feng Ling didn't expect him to be so angry. When she asked Jin Wan to buy medicine for her, she thought that their professional identities were suitable for an accidental pregnancy. Besides, she had known Miss Wen for a long time and often heard Miss Wen's doctor friends talk about the experiences of girls who got pregnant accidentally, so she thought it was not the right time. Besides, she wasn't ready, so she asked Jin Wan to buy medicine for her. Jin Wan nodded. But she didn't expect that a contraceptive pill would make him so angry. Did he mean that he wanted to have a child with her? Feng Ling didn't think about it at all. She just looked at the anger in the man's eyes and found that she was speechless. Facing his eyes, she didn't know what to say. She was silent for a moment before looking into his eyes and saying, "I didn't think that much." She wanted to explain, but when the words came to her mouth, she didn't know how to say it. She was not good at expressing herself, and he seemed to be really angry. In Feng Ling's mind, she was a little confused. Did he really want a child? Seeing that she clearly wanted to say something, but in the end, she just looked at him calmly, Li Nanheng couldn't bear her attitude of being too restrained and too trapped in her own world. He suddenly raised her chin, lowered his head, and kissed her hard on the lips. In the beginning, there seemed to be a bit of anger. Although the kiss did not go deep, there was a bit of nibbling. He was determined to make her react in pain. However, seeing the little woman pressed against the door by him, her calm eyes gradually revealed some helplessness. He then saw that the corners of her eyes were a little red from his kiss. That kind of red was not because she was about to cry, but whenever she seemed to be forced into a corner by his passion, a faint blush would appear on her face out of habit. It could represent the most obvious feeling of a young girl on her body. At least under his kiss, he could directly see the reflection of her eyes with his eyes. It had to be said that Feng Ling, a woman who usually looked stubborn, when she was really helpless, her gaze was really more useful than any aphrodisiac. Just this one look was enough to make him, a man who had just had sex, want to throw her on the narrow bed next to him. In this small room that had no soundproofing at all and was so shabby that the wooden wall could collapse at any time, he wanted to strip her clean on the spot. He wanted to tear off her clothes and leave more marks on her body so that she would clearly remember who was her man. He wanted her to be covered with his marks from inside to outside, from top to bottom. No matter what kind of contraceptive pill she took, they would not be able to get rid of it. Feng Ling was forced to lean against the door and was almost suffocated by the man's kiss. She raised her hand and pinched his shoulder hard to make him let go of her, and then silently accused him of his violence with her slightly red eyes. But Li Nanheng was really angry. He saw that she was extremely tired at that time. Although he planned to take her back to the United States to confront Feng Mingzhu, considering that she really wanted to rest at that time, and considering that she didn't want to acknowledge the Feng family, he left her in T-City and flew back to the United States alone to deal with Feng Mingzhu's matter. It was just a flight of more than 10 hours. He originally planned to let her have a good sleep first. She, on the other hand, actually dared to eat the medicine without even saying a word. Thinking back to all these years, when he thought that she was still a man and that he was gay, he was willing to sacrifice his feelings for her. Later on, when he found out that she was a woman, for the sake of her dignity and what she wanted, he helped her keep her secret and slowly approached her step by step, afraid that he would scare her. Chapter 1154. But what had she done all this time? She's been hiding. If she didn't like him, it would be fine. He could just treat it as a one-sided love. It didn't mean that as long as he gave his feelings, the other person had to reciprocate with the same feelings. But she liked him. However, although she looked tough on the surface, she was timid from time to time. She was the kind of person who would be happy like a child if someone gave her a little bit of hope and sunshine. But as long as someone told her that the sunshine didn't belong to her, she would immediately go back into the darkness, curl up, and hide. Li Nanheng didn't intend to give her another chance to escape. After knowing her feelings, he just wanted to drag her out of her snail shell step by step. Behind Feng Ling's stubbornness, there was a timidity that others couldn't see. If she was allowed to be like this, she would only show her back and the back of her head to others. She looked tough, heroic, and fearless, as though everyone in front of her was just a passerby, but Li Nanheng knew that this was just a layer of cold, hard shell on the outside of her fragility. He had seen the warmth and love that Feng Ling had carefully tested. It was so pure and clean. Although her reaction was always slow, it was extremely sincere. He didn't want to hide her back in her hard shell because of the misunderstanding 3 years ago, and he couldn't let her continue to be so timid. Feng Ling could no longer wear such a cold and unapproachable mask. If she was unwilling to take off this mask, he would take it off for her. But step by step until today, she used her hypocritical shell on the surface to hit the heart that he held in front of her with his hands again and again. How could she be so cruel? Feng Ling felt that the man's hand had unexpectedly reached into her clothes and was even ruthlessly trying to carve something on her body. It was very heavy, and wherever his palm passed, it was slightly painful. She bit her lips and turned her face away. Just as she was about to scold him, she suddenly heard footsteps approaching from outside. Her eyes flickered and she was about to speak, but at this moment, the man bent down and harshly pressed his lips against hers. Feng Ling immediately frowned. Under the man's angry kiss, she also stared at his black eyes angrily. She glared at him angrily, but he didn't close his eyes. The two of them looked at each other very closely, and their lips hurt. Their eyes also hurt from staring at each other, but they didn't let go. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. Feng Ling's heart suddenly trembled with fright. She leaned against the door plank, which was just a very thin plank made of local trees in Cambodia. It was just a temporary war camp of 11 base, so it was very simple. When the door plank was knocked gently, she seemed to feel the vibration and force between the fingers of the person knocking on the door. Feng Ling, have you found the charger? My cell phone is running out of power. Lend it to me. Tam's voice rang outside the door, and then he knocked twice. Where are you? Didn't you say you would come in to get the charger? Are you too tired? Why don't you go to sleep? Feeling there was no response from the door, Tam knocked gently outside and muttered, "Gee, women are really inconvenient. When we were brothers, we could just push the door open to get the charger. Now you are a girl. If you really fall asleep, it's not convenient for me to go in." Then he continued to knock. Don't blame me for being annoyed. My cell phone is really running out of power. Hurry up, Feng Ling. Feeling that Tam's voice was in her ear, Feng Ling instinctively held her breath. However, when the man who was pressing her against the door heard the words outside, he didn't let go of her at all. Instead, when he saw her nervousness, he suddenly sneered, lowered his head and continued to kiss her lips. When she was not paying attention, his tongue swept up and the kiss was so deep that she almost sobbed. She tried hard to hold back her tears and glared at the man who was acting recklessly, warning him that there was someone outside, but Li Nanheng still didn't close his eyes. He kissed her deeply, entangled the stiff tip of her tongue in her mouth, and watched her expression full of worry, embarrassment, and panic as if he could only find some comfort in her anxious expression. Seeing that she was more nervous, he kissed her deeper. Even his hands kept moving behind her, and his hands had already moved past the secret button of her underwear. Because of the movement of his hands behind her, Feng Ling only felt a layer of goosebumps on her back. She glared at him and was so angry that she was about to bite him. However, when she opened her mouth to bite him, the man suddenly let go of her lips, pressed his forehead against hers, and whispered while panting against her lips, "Tell him, there is someone in your room, N. Are you crazy?" Feng Ling was so angry that she whispered, "Where are you now? Mr. Mo's life is still in danger. How dare you flirt here?" Before she finished speaking, she was kissed hard by the man again. Tam, who was standing outside the door, seemed to hear something, but he couldn't hear it clearly. He thought it was Feng Ling playing with her mobile phone inside, so he knocked on the door a few times and asked, "Feng Ling, are you asleep or awake? Don't mess with me. I'm really waiting for the charger to be used urgently." Hearing that Tam was really anxious, Feng Ling raised her hand and pushed hard on Li Nanheng's shoulder, but the man held her tightly, sucked her lips, and continued to press his hand against the door. If she moved a little more, his hand would definitely make a clear sound on the door. Feng Ling felt as if she was threatened now. She glared at him and raised her leg to attack his lower body, but the man pressed her leg down the moment she moved, looked down at her, and said lightly, "Mo Jingshan won't die. You're not Jin Wan. Why are you so anxious? I'm about to die of anger because of you. Are you really stupid or just pretending to be stupid? Can't you tell I'm angry? What the hell are you angry with?" Feng Ling said angrily. "Feng Ling." Tam's voice came again from outside the door. "Who the hell are you talking to? What are you doing inside? Was there someone else in your room?" Speaking of this, Tam suddenly paused and turned to look at another room opposite this one. The door was closed, and he remembered that it seemed to be the place where Boss Lee lived recently. Chapter 1155. Looking at the door of the room for a while, Tam hesitated and walked over. He knocked on the door, but no one was there. He raised his hand and tried to push the door again, only to find that the door opened and was not locked. But there was no one in the room. But he remembered that Boss Lee was not outside at this time, and it was not the time for Boss Lee to take the lead in patrolling. So where was Boss Lee at this time? A few seconds later, Tam seemed to think of something. He suddenly turned to look at the tightly closed door of Fong Ling's room and suddenly took a step back as if there was a thorn in his back. He immediately cleared his throat and suddenly said, "Cough, well, I'll go borrow a charger from someone else." "Fong Ling, you go ahead. Don't worry about me. I remember that Lin Cheng's cell phone model seems to be this one. I'll go borrow it from him." With that, Tam ran away as if running for his life. Hearing Tam's tone, Fong Ling knew that he must have guessed something. Fong Ling leaned against the door and rolled her eyes at the man's shoulder. When she raised her eyes again, the man took advantage of the fact that the people outside had left and was about to pick her up and throw her onto the bed. The moment her feet left the ground, she coldly said, "I didn't take birth control pills." The man's originally angry and somewhat violent mood stagnated in an instant. His movements paused, lowering his eyes to look at the little woman in his arms who had a cold expression on her face. "What?" "I said, I didn't take contraceptive pills." Fong Ling turned her eyes to him. Because of this posture, when she turned around, her face was very close to his. She didn't avoid him but looked at him calmly. "I didn't take them." Fong Ling's eyes were frank and clean, without any trace of guilt. When the man raised his eyebrows, she said, "I did ask Mrs. Mo to buy contraceptive pills for me that day, but after buying them, she told me that this kind of pills would be harmful to my body and asked me to think carefully before taking them. I was very confused at that time and didn't think clearly, so I put the pills in the drawer. In the evening," she paused and then said, "I wanted to take a bath, but I found that I was on my period." Hearing the word period, Li Nanheng frowned. Her period came at the right time. "I remember hearing from Miss Wen's doctor friend that if you forget to take your medicine after sex and your period comes a few days later, then you don't have to worry about anything, because you definitely won't get pregnant at that stage. I just had sex with you and my period came at night, which means that I definitely didn't win the lottery, so I simply didn't take the medicine." "The medicine has been in the drawer in the bedroom," she said as she looked at him. "Today is the 3rd day of my period. If you don't believe me, you can try it yourself." Since she said so, then it must be true. There was no need to believe or not. However, Li Nanheng still instinctively carried her to sit on the bed and reached his hand down. Sure enough, he felt a soft thing under her lower body. No wonder she looked normal today, but she didn't look very well. It turned out that she was on her period. It was inevitable that she would feel a little uncomfortable after coming here from High City, but she was used to holding back her discomfort. Of course, she wouldn't easily say this kind of thing. Although it wasn't the first time that they had done it, Gu Ning couldn't remember how many times they had done it during the night and the morning in Tea City a few days ago. Gu Ning had touched Gu Ning's body from head to toe. However, during her menstrual period, allowing a man to touch her lower body to see if she was really wearing a sanitary pad was really too intimate. Although it was nothing, it was really too intimate. Fong Ling didn't speak anymore, but the accusation and displeasure in her eyes were obvious. At this moment, the anger on Li Nanheng's body had also subsided, and it had completely subsided. So his anger just now was actually just a misunderstanding. At that time, he almost did something to her. He glanced at the marks left on her neck that had yet to fade, and then at her slightly pale face. He stared blankly at the way she was forcefully held in his arms. Li Nanheng coughed, slowly withdrew his hand from under her knees, and tentatively pressed it against her stomach. Then do you feel uncomfortable now? Does your stomach hurt or, my stomach hurts? Feng Ling didn't want to hide anything now, looked at him coldly, and answered directly. Li Nanheng, facing Feng Ling who cried in pain, he felt even more guilty in an instant. He hurriedly rubbed her stomach with his hand. Does it hurt? How long has it hurt? It has been hurting since you came in. I wanted to come back to lie down and rest after taking the charger for Tam, but the dog pressed me against the door and bit me for a long time. Feng Ling continued to look at him coldly. Li Nanheng, after a long while, he said helplessly, sorry. His hand was still slowly rubbing her stomach. Feng Ling didn't want to talk to him and was about to get up from his arms. Although Li Nanheng was reluctant to let her go, seeing that she was really angry, he knew he had wronged her, so he quickly let her go. Feng Ling was finally free. After getting down from his legs, she reached out and pulled his shoulder, trying to make him stand up. Li Nanheng stood up. He thought she had something to say, but Feng Ling pointed to the door with a dark face. Get out. Li Nanheng, I apologize. I don't need your apology. Get out. I want to rest. Li Nanheng, I was impulsive just now. If you are really angry, you can punch me, I don't want to do anything now. Get out. Feng Ling lost her patience. She reached out and pushed him out. She pulled open the door and pushed the man out without a care. Then she closed the door. Knowing that she was angry, Li Nanheng didn't force her. After being pushed out of the door, he wanted to stand outside the door and repent. At this time, he had to admit his mistake quickly. Otherwise, this little wife would really give him the cold shoulder for several days. However, just when he was pushed out of the door, Tam, who had finally borrowed a charger from someone else's room, was happily walking here with a charger and a data cable in his hand, whistling. He was just passing by, but suddenly ran into Li Nanheng who was pushed out of the door by Feng Ling. The two men looked at each other, and Li Nanheng glanced at him expressionlessly. With just a glance, the smile in Tam's eyes and the whistling sound in his mouth all stopped abruptly. Oh my God! The mighty and cold boss Li was driven out of the room by Feng Ling. What should he do now? Was it too late to pretend to be blind? Kiss me for monthly votes. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.